Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Marie Carlson. In 1974, a baby girl named Marie was born in the Philippines to an ordinary family. Concerned about her daughter's future, Marie's mother made the difficult decision to send her to the United States, where she believed Marie would have better opportunities for success. As a result, Marie was placed in a foster family with a military background, where she met a young girl named Esther, who was the same age as her. Two young girls quickly became close friends, unaware of a surprising fact that linked them together. What Marie didn't know was that her American foster father was actually her biological parent, making Esther her biological sister. As they grew older, the sisters left their parents' house and decided to start a new life together. They chose to settle in Florida, where they rented a cozy apartment near a karaoke club that soon became their favorite hangout spot. Marie Carlson's life was a vibrant reflection of her favorite color, pink. She had always believed that living a beautiful life was essential, surrounding herself with flowers and lovely things. But everything changed when she met Jeff, and she discovered a new, profound meaning in life: love. They quickly fell for each other, got married, and had a daughter named Paris, a name that symbolized the love and beauty they shared. Despite their happy family life, Jeff remained an enigma. His past and last name were shrouded in mystery. Meanwhile, Marie was driven to succeed in her career. She had set her sights on joining the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and was studying criminal law to achieve her goal. However, her journey was not without its challenges. As she progressed in her career, the obstacles grew tougher, and despite her best efforts, Marie ultimately left the police service without realizing her dream. Marie's life took a devastating turn due to a mental health disorder that worsened over time. The trauma of being sexually abused as a child left her with deep emotional scars. As a result, her daily life became increasingly painful, and her relationship with her husband, Jeff, began to suffer. The love they once shared started to fade, and their marriage eventually ended in divorce. The divorce was a difficult but necessary decision, as both Marie and Jeff knew they needed to prioritize their daughter, Paris. They agreed that it would be best for Paris to live with Jeff, allowing her to escape the negativity that had been affecting their home. Despite the challenges, they completed the necessary paperwork amicably and with minimal drama. Throughout the long and difficult divorce process, Marie and Jeff remained dedicated to making decisions that would benefit and care for their daughter, Paris. They remained on good terms and continued to care for each other as friends. Marie was grateful for Jeff's support and made it a priority to spend quality time with Paris, never missing a birthday. Marie had faced many challenges, but she remained determined and refused to surrender. Despite her struggles, she never lost hope. One day, she discovered what had been missing in her life: faith. This newfound faith led her to the Emerald Coast Church, founded by the charismatic pastor James Flanders and his wife Tanya. From the moment she stepped into the church, Marie felt a sense of belonging. The warm and welcoming atmosphere, combined with Pastor James Flanders' sincere and heartfelt sermons, made her feel at home. Marie began the process of recovering and healing from her past experiences, working to make amends and move forward. The Flanders, known for their kindness and generosity, had created a sanctuary where people could find help and support. For Marie, the church became more than just a place of worship. It was a loving community that accepted her with open arms. As she surrounded herself with the church's loving atmosphere, Marie began to heal and grow. With each passing day, Marie felt a sense of freedom and joy that she had never known before. She was no longer the lost and broken person she once was. Instead, she was a strong and vibrant individual, filled with hope and happiness. As she looked out at the sunny Florida landscape, Marie's eyes shone with a newfound radiance, reflecting the beauty and joy that had blossomed in her soul. The church was more than just a building, it was a community of people who genuinely cared for one another. For Marie, this small community became a second family, filled with love, light, and faith. From the outside, the church appeared ordinary, but inside, it felt like a warm and welcoming home. The people gathered there were united by their shared faith, and time seemed to stand still as they came together. Marie, however, was hiding a secret. She was pregnant, and the weight of this secret was crushing her. She felt ashamed and fearful, and only a few close people knew the truth. In June 2021, at the age of 37, Marie gave birth to her second daughter, Grace. As the news spread through the quiet town, people began to wonder who the father of the child was. The truth was painful. The father was a man Marie had been dating briefly, but he had turned out to be abusive and hurtful. When Marie became pregnant, he disappeared without a word. Left alone and broken, Marie found solace in the church. The Flanders family and the local community showed Marie and her newborn daughter overwhelming kindness and acceptance. They provided a safe and nurturing environment, filling a vital need in Marie's life by becoming like a substitute family. Through their selfless support, Marie was able to find the courage, optimism, and start the healing process from the trauma of her past. Marie had been feeling trapped in her life, and just 3 months after giving birth to her daughter, she made a shocking decision that left everyone stunned. She posted a mysterious message on social media announcing that she was leaving, not just her city, but also her family and friends behind. Marie had been secretly planning her escape, careful not to reveal her intentions to anyone, fearing they would try to talk her out of it. She only hinted at her dreams and expressed her love for her loved ones, making it clear that she was leaving for good. Her departure left many questions unanswered. Where was she going? What path would she take? And would she achieve her dreams? Marie's loved ones were devastated, worried sick about her safety and unsure of what to do next. The uncertainty surrounding her disappearance only added to their anxiety. Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, was particularly frantic and decided to contact the police to help find her. As the days passed, the worry and fear for Marie's fate only intensified. Marie's sudden disappearance from Fort Walton Beach had barely stopped making headlines when a disturbing revelation emerged. She had left behind her 3-month-old daughter. This news sparked immediate concern from Marie's sister, Esther, who knew her siblings' devotion to her children. "This is out of character for her," Esther said, her voice shaking. "She's always been extremely protective of her kids." Those who knew Marie were shocked by her disappearance. As a mother, she had always been exemplary, particularly with her 7-year-old daughter, Paris. Marie's ex-husband, Jeff, was especially stunned when he learned that she had stopped visiting Paris, as they had been inseparable. Now, at 37, Marie had vanished without a trace. While she had the right to start anew, the police couldn't ignore the fact that she had left her young child behind. The police analyzed Marie's recent messages and discovered a peculiar aspect: her writing style had changed significantly from before. This led them to suspect that she might be under duress or that the messages were fabricated. An investigation was launched, which soon impacted Marie's personal life. Questions arose about the identity of her daughter Grace's father and the nature of their relationship with Marie. However, even Marie's sister Esther was unable to confirm or deny these suspicions. The police were faced with a complex web of secrets surrounding Marie's disappearance, including the mysterious messages and the uncertainty about Grace's father. In an effort to clarify the situation, the police spoke with Tanya and James Flanders. They revealed that Marie had a history of disappearing temporarily without explanation. The Flanders also shared that Marie had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which could have contributed to her erratic behavior. A few weeks before she vanished, Marie experienced a severe episode of depression. She began taking medication but was forced to stop due to her pregnancy. Feeling extremely unwell, Marie asked the Flanders family to care for her daughter while she rested. After lunch, Marie lay down to rest, and Tanya and Grace went out shopping. James stayed with Marie to keep an eye on her, but he left for a short time to go home. When he returned, he was shocked to find that Marie and her car were nowhere to be found. The Flanders family immediately launched a search for Marie. They scoured the streets, checking the parking lots of every building, but found no sign of her. Then, James had an idea to check the airport, and to their astonishment, they found Marie's car parked there. Using the spare keys, James drove the car back home. When investigators examined the car, they did not find any suspicious marks or evidence that could lead to Marie's whereabouts. The investigators returned to the airport, hoping to find new leads. Their plan was to review the parking lot camera footage, as the airport is required to keep this information on file. They also hoped to find Marie's ticket, which might have her fingerprints on it. However, when they found the ticket, it didn't yield any useful results. The ticket was clean, with no fingerprints or other clues that could aid in the investigation. A search of Marie's car also turned up nothing, and the parking ticket didn't contain any fingerprints. To make matters worse, the cameras in the parking lot weren't working on the day Marie disappeared. This lack of footage was a significant setback for the investigation, leaving the question of whether Marie's disappearance was a tragic accident or a carefully planned escape. As the investigation continued, the police began to suspect that Marie's disappearance might be more sinister than initially thought. They reclassified the case as a murder investigation and shifted their focus to the mysterious father of Marie's child, Grace. The police returned to the church, hoping to find some answers to their questions. Who was Grace's father, and what role did he play in Marie's disappearance? The church, where Marie had found solace, was filled with rumors and speculation. Parishioners whispered about Marie's secret and the plan that had been weighing on her mind. Marie had been struggling with depression and had considered an abortion, but the Flanders family, who were eager to expand their family, had strongly opposed this idea. The Flanders asked Marie to leave her baby with them, while hypocritically offering to help her. Unbeknownst to others, they desperately wanted a second child, despite both being over 40. One parishioner claimed that Marie's baby, Grace, was a reward from above for the Flanders' good deeds. The situation took a turn when Jeff, Marie's ex-husband, arrived on the scene. He was not the father of the child but had information that could solve the mystery. Jeff revealed that he had noticed Marie's pregnancy and had questioned her about the father. Marie lied, saying she was a surrogate mother for the Flanders. However, the investigation that followed revealed the truth. Police spoke with Tanya's friends, who were also church members, and eventually, the truth came to light. It turned out that the father of the child was James, and the conception was natural. This meant that James's wife, Tanya, had to silently accept the situation. The revelation caught the investigators' attention, and the Flanders were summoned for questioning once again. Tanya was the only one who showed up for questioning. She confirmed the information and added that she was present when the child was conceived. According to her, everything happened with the mutual consent of all parties involved. After Marie disappeared, disturbing details about her relationship with James and Tanya came to light. It turned out that James was intimately involved with both women, which was not just infidelity but a form of polygamy. At one point, they even celebrated the child's birthday together, taking a photo of James, Tanya, and Marie posing as a happy family. However, this photo was meant to mislead, suggesting that the celebration was only for Tanya and that Marie was not involved. But after questioning Tanya's friends, the investigation uncovered new information that revealed the true nature of their relationship. Although Tanya claimed that Marie was initially happy with the arrangement, it became clear that this was no longer the case at some point. Marie's feelings for her daughter Grace were stirred after she was born, and she became hesitant to give her up to Tanya. According to friends, Marie's reservations fueled her jealousy of Tanya, sparking suspicion that Marie might not want to surrender her child to her rival and planned to steal James away from her. These rumors swiftly elevated Tanya to the top of the suspect list. Following Marie's disappearance, all Tanya's problems would essentially dissolve, granting her the opportunity to raise Grace solo and retain her status as James's beloved wife. However, 2 months had passed since Marie vanished, yet no leads emerged. Investigators diligently attempted to unravel the mysteries surrounding Marie's disappearance using available tools, including GPS data. Despite its limitations in 2011, investigators focused on analyzing phone records and message logs to gather more information. The records revealed that Marie had accompanied James to the airport, but Tanya was absent. This development coincided with the unexpected visit of Jason, a young priest who often represented James and ultimately chose to share information with investigators. Jason shared with others a conversation he had unintentionally overheard after Marie vanished. James expressed his distress and concern, stating that he would have to leave the country due to Marie's disappearance, but he couldn't disclose the details. He only mentioned that something terrible had occurred during Marie's severe depression. Prior to her disappearance, James had stayed with Marie at a clinic for a few days, while Jason temporarily took his place. Meanwhile, rumors about polygamy began circulating among the church parishioners, which shocked Jason when he discovered them. Upon James' return from the hospital, Jason decided to discuss the matter with him. Jason asked James about his relationship with Marie. James was honest and admitted to having a romantic relationship with both Marie and his wife. He revealed that he and Marie had a heated argument before her disappearance, which escalated into a physical fight. However, James insisted that Marie was alive and well at the time of her disappearance. Following their conversation, James decided to resign as pastor and soon left the city with his family, including Tanya and Grace, to move to Arizona. Shortly before their departure, Marie's family had contacted the Flanders family to collect some of Marie's belongings. As a result, investigators obtained Marie's phone, which may have contained crucial information. The investigation into Marie's disappearance was initially hindered because most of the data on James' phone had been deleted. However, investigators were able to recover some fragments, including a video of James promoting precious metals. This finding raised suspicions, particularly since the case took place in 2011, when digital evidence was easier to erase and surveillance was less widespread. At that time, DNA detection technologies were still in their infancy, making it seem like criminals could easily escape punishment. However, the field of digital forensics was also advancing, and it was this expertise that ultimately helped crack the case. 3 years after Marie vanished, a new program became available that enabled investigators to recover data from phones and computers. This technology allowed them to access messages between Marie and James, which painted a disturbing picture of their relationship. The recovered messages included explicit images, some of which were taken inside a church. Perhaps most damningly, Marie's emails to James revealed her deep desire to leave Fort Walton Beach, fearing the place was cursed. Her messages hinted at her desperation to escape with her child. A chain of unexpected and dramatic events led to the Flanders family's deepest secrets being exposed. Flanders said, "When someone spreads rumors or harms me, I want them to cease to exist." Given James' situation, shrouded in darkness and fear, it's possible he fulfilled this ominous promise. Despite the lack of Marie's body, there was sufficient evidence to issue an arrest warrant for James on charges of second-degree murder. However, the prosecutor faced a significant challenge, convincing the jury of James' guilt without the victim's body. James and his lawyer were in a desperate situation with an uncertain future ahead, so they made a drastic decision as a last resort to try and turn things around. If James revealed Marie's body's location, he would be charged with manslaughter, a crime with a more moderate sentence. After years of anguish, Marie's family agreed to this deal. James's words revealed a disturbing truth. He and Marie had a tumultuous relationship, frequently arguing about her struggles with depression. During one heated argument, Marie physically lashed out at James, and in an attempt to calm her down, he inadvertently knocked her to the ground. Tragically, she lost her life. In the aftermath, James was overcome with guilt and regret. He had unknowingly contributed to Marie's death, and his attempts to revive her were unsuccessful. The investigators eventually discovered Marie's body in the yard of James's house, buried 5 feet underground and wrapped in a blanket. The discovery was a shock to everyone involved, as they had been searching for her for years. The consequences of James's actions were severe. He was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 15 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 11 years. His wife, Tanya, claimed to have been unaware of James's crime and was deeply shocked by the news of Marie's death. Marie's body was discovered after a delay, which hindered experts from determining the cause of her death. This delayed discovery may have impacted the direction of the investigation. 5 years later, Marie's family and friends were finally able to lay her to rest and find closure at her funeral. Her sister Esther might have even sung a final song in her honor. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michael Redlick. Danielle was born in 1976 in Florida. Her family later moved to Cleveland, Ohio. She grew up kind and well-mannered with a creative nature. Danielle was the eldest child and appreciated beauty from a young age. She attended Valencia College and later enrolled in the psychology department at Baldwin Wallace University in 1996. Her mother, Caitlin Aquino, remarried with Michael but passed away from cancer after a short 2-year marriage. Caitlin, battling breast cancer, received high-quality care due to her Michael's insurance. They formally married for medical benefits, but the treatment was unsuccessful. After her death, her husband, Michael Redlick, raised their children alone. At 22, Danielle, the eldest daughter, returned home to help, bringing her brother and sister with her to live with Michael. Danielle later made the unexpected decision to marry her stepfather, Michael. Started as a friend in 2019. Danielle cared for the younger kids and worked at a bar at night, while Michael built his sports recruitment career. He became attached to the children and felt comfortable with Danielle, who saw him as a dependable support despite their 20-year age difference. Their easy and natural interaction gradually brought them closer together. Danielle initially kept her relationship with Michael hidden from her family. With Michael, she felt loved and protected. He found her a job at an advertising agency, had a high income, and devoted time to the family. Things were going well for both. When Michael received a job offer to become the Memphis Grizzlies vice president, he asked Danielle to move with him, but she hesitated. Danielle declined to join Michael due to her studies and familiar lifestyle, but they continued their long-distance relationship. One day, Michael showed her a cottage he bought for them by the Mississippi River, impressing her with its picturesque location. She eventually moved in, and Michael found her a job in radio. Initially, everything was perfect, but Michael's job later brought changes. Michael's new position brought increased stress and tension with management. He became stressed and tired, often unwinding with alcohol, which became a daily habit. He'd return home late, intoxicated, and angry. Danielle tried to support him, but his promises to stop were short-lived. After missing a planned dinner, tension between them grew. Danielle was upset, saying if he couldn't make time for her, he should have warned her. Danielle made a joke, which struck a nerve with Michael, and he slapped her across the face, causing her to stagger back. Her clothes and the floor were bloodied. In shock, she recoiled as Michael cried and apologized. He took her to a sports doctor, who provided first aid and recommended seeing a dentist and plastic surgeon due to the severity of her injuries, including a chipped front tooth. The next day, Michael made amends with a thoughtful dinner, showering his wife with attention and care. Despite the previous day's incident, she forgave him and chose not to report it, aware of the strict domestic violence laws in their state. This wasn't the first warning sign, however. Danielle had already experienced similar behavior from Michael before the incident. In 2003, Michael and Danielle had a daughter named Jaden. A year later, they decided to formalize their relationship. Life was going well for them, but Michael still faced obstacles at work due to a change in management, which prevented him from getting a long-awaited promotion. 7 years later, their son Sawyer was born, and both of two devoted themselves to raising their children. However, Michael's work struggles and added responsibilities took a toll on him, triggering a return to drinking and more frequent conflicts with Danielle. Michael's behavior finally reached a boiling point during an argument in which he physically attacked Danielle, grabbing her by the throat and holding her against the wall. The incident was incredibly frightening for Danielle. She realized she could no longer tolerate Michael's rough behavior and made the difficult decision to leave him, taking the children with her. Danielle moved in with her relatives, who had initially been skeptical of her marriage to Michael but had grown to accept it over time. In an attempt to win her back, Michael visited Danielle multiple times, apologized for his actions, and asked her to return home. After a period of separation, they eventually reconciled and restored their relationship. The years following were marked by uncertainty. The Redlick family relocated to California for 5 years, but struggled with Michael's drinking habit. After losing their jobs, they relied on savings until moving to Indiana in 2014, seeking a fresh start and stability. Michael moved first, while Danielle stayed behind in California with the children. They needed time to sell their old home and belongings, a process that took a year. The constant relocating had taken a toll on the family, especially the children, who struggled to adapt to their new surroundings. Meanwhile, the family's financial situation improved, but the distance between Danielle and Michael began to affect their marriage. They grew apart, communicating less and less, as the infrequent visits took a strain on their relationship. Danielle and Michael faced new challenges after reuniting. Danielle noticed Michael's emotional distance and dwindling romantic connection. In reality, Michael was struggling with personal issues related to age and health, affecting his intimate life. He confessed his struggles to Danielle, fearing rejection, but she responded with empathy and reassured him of her support. After trying various medications, they decided to try hormone injections. With the testosterone injections, Michael experienced a resurgence in his physical and mental health. He regained the energy and vitality of his younger years. However, this newfound energy also led to increased aggression. One evening, while Danielle was brushing her teeth, Michael attacked her in the bathroom. His reasoning for this violent outburst was that she had failed to wake him up when she went to rest the previous evening. Danielle was fed up with the situation and decided to leave. However, this only infuriated her husband, who then choked her. Danielle was unable to defend herself and started to lose consciousness. She felt like she was on the verge of death. When she eventually came to, she saw her husband standing over her, looking scared and confused, and begging for forgiveness. All Danielle could manage to do was to silently crawl away from him. Following this incident, they continued to live together in the same house and raise their children, but their relationship was irreparably altered. Apparently, the situation at home had reached a breaking point. Michael's drinking problem worsened, leading to more frequent arguments over small issues. These disputes often turned violent, causing stress and fear for the family. Despite her unhappiness and resentment, she remained in the relationship, still deeply loving her husband. Their daughter Danielle also suffered, becoming anxious and withdrawn. She took up photography as a hobby to distract herself from her troubles. Despite their issues, the Redlick family appeared to be a respectable family to outsiders, as they generally kept their disagreements private. By the end of 2014, the family had finally settled in Florida. Around this time, Michael decided to change careers, seeking a less stressful profession. He started working as the Director of External Affairs and Partnership Programs at the University of Central Florida and also began teaching. Although Michael's post-NBA career income was lower, the job provided him with a sense of fulfillment and stability. The family initially rented a home in Winter Park but eventually purchased a large, Mediterranean-style house in the area. The house had a unique feature, an attic floor that Danielle claimed as her own private retreat, often retreating there on nights when Michael's anger issues flared up. As Michael received testosterone injections, their intimate life briefly improved, but even in these moments, he could be emotionally harsh. Their relationship remained strained, and Danielle turned to alcohol to cope. With Michael working and providing for the family, Danielle managed the household and children, but her dependency worsened, and she became increasingly withdrawn. The frequent arguments eventually led to their separation in 2016. Despite Michael's controlling behavior, Danielle continued to allow him to see the children and provide financial support. As Danielle began working at a school, she started to regain her independence with the help of new friends. They helped her overcome her depression, but she still maintained a relationship with Michael, giving him unrestricted access to her life. This arrangement ultimately led to another violent argument, resulting in Danielle's hospitalization with a concussion. Fearing repercussions for Michael, she kept quiet about the incident. However, on this occasion, Michael took Danielle's silence as a sign that she would continue to tolerate his behavior. When questioned, Danielle revealed a shocking incident that had occurred in early October 2016. Michael had attempted to run her over with his car, but she narrowly escaped by jumping into the bushes. This incident prompted Danielle to visit the police department, but when detectives started asking detailed questions, she became hesitant and left without filing a report. The reason for their initial separation was the same as before, but they eventually reconciled and returned to their shared home. However, this decision ultimately proved disastrous for both of them. On January 12, 2019, at approximately 9 a.m., a 911 call was placed. During the call, a woman identifying herself as Danielle Redlick reported that her husband, Michael, had suffered a fatal heart attack. When the rescue service arrived, they noticed a strong smell of cleaning agent and a bucket of pink-colored water at the entrance to the living room. Michael lay on the floor in a pool of blood, lifeless, with a penetrating knife wound. Michelle, who made the call, had cuts on her wrists and was taken to the hospital after receiving first aid. The police investigation revealed that Michael Redlick's life had been taken, and forensic analysis confirmed the blood traces belonged to the deceased. The pink liquid was diluted blood, and someone had tried to erase a trail from the bedroom to the living room. Despite cleaning efforts, blood spatter was found on walls and corners, and a large knife was discovered at the kitchen entrance, with 3 smaller knives in the sink. Detectives questioned Danielle after her injuries were deemed non-life-threatening. She changed her story multiple times, initially claiming her husband died of heart disease, then saying he took his own life after an argument. Experts disputed this, citing the difficulty of self-inflicting such a wound and the usual preference for simpler methods. The autopsy revealed Michael died from blood loss, which could have been prevented with timely medical help. He also had a lacerated eye and high levels of alcohol in his system. An investigation found that Michael and Danielle had an argument days before the incident, witnessed by their daughter Jaden. Michael had been drinking and burst into the bathroom where Danielle was hiding, but Jaden intervened and took the bottle away. Danielle left the house and returned after Michael fell asleep. Jaden said it was the first time she'd seen her father so angry, but he apologized multiple times and was normally a loving father. The next day, they reconciled and attended a soccer game, but Danielle appeared upset and barely spoke. That evening, Danielle and her husband dropped off their kids at a friend's house for a sleepover, leaving them alone for the night. Later, Danielle stopped by McDonald's to pick up dinner and returned home around 10:30 p.m. When she arrived, she found her husband intoxicated. During dinner, Danielle received a text message from an unknown number. Her husband saw the message, became enraged, and physically attacked her, attempting to strangle her. In an effort to defend herself, Danielle grabbed a nearby knife and stabbed her husband in the chest. He fell to the ground, bleeding heavily. Danielle claimed that she immediately called for emergency assistance, but accidentally dialed the wrong number. An investigation later confirmed her account of events. Danielle explained that she lied to the 911 operator and during interrogation because she was afraid of not being believed that she had acted in self-defense. This fear was partly due to prior incidents that had damaged her credibility with authorities. She had recently been involved in a physical altercation with friends and had also resisted arrest when police arrived at the scene of the incident, even attempting to bite an officer. Her uncooperative behavior during the investigation led to charges of disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. As a result, she worried that her claims of self-defense would be met with skepticism. Danielle was on probation for about a year. The cuts on her wrists were self-inflicted but superficial, leading investigators to doubt her claim of trying to end her life due to emotional turmoil. They also found she wasn't a role model, because she having signed up on a dating site and being unfaithful after learning of Michael's infidelity. Analysis of messages between Michael and Danielle showed she still loved him, but felt betrayed and disillusioned after learning of his affairs and plans to leave her. She was heartbroken, feeling he didn't appreciate her dedication. The prosecution used this against her. The prosecutor claimed the crime was premeditated in a fit of rage due to Michael's infidelity and impending divorce. Neighbors confirmed their loud arguments often turned physical. While Michael was described as kind and helpful, Danielle was seen as quarrelsome. Video evidence showed her acting irrationally and attacking others. Danielle's lawyer claimed her actions were self-defense due to a history of emotional and physical abuse by Michael. Relatives confirmed he was rough and emotionally abusive, frequently humiliating her, although never in their presence. They also noted Danielle became nervous and quick-tempered after years of marriage, but a relative recalled calling her crazy. The prosecution claims Danielle deliberately left her husband to die, indicating she was waiting for him to pass away. They found she used a dating app on the night of the incident, suggesting premeditation driven by hatred and financial gain. Danielle stood to lose a portion of their shared wealth after the divorce. Her net worth was $1.2 million at the time of Michael's death. She had repeatedly changed her statements, possibly to confuse the investigation and tamper with evidence. The defense claimed Michael was a manipulator who preyed on his stepdaughter after his first wife's death. Despite a plea deal offering a 10-year sentence for manslaughter, the defendant insisted on her innocence, risking a life sentence for first or second-degree murder. The jury delivered a verdict on July 17, 2022, finding Danielle Redlick not guilty of premeditated murder, but guilty of tampering with evidence. She received a 5-year suspended sentence, which was reduced to 2 years due to time served. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jamie Melgar. Sandra Melgar often lies in her small prison cell, reflecting on the unexpected turns her life has taken. She never imagined she'd become a widow and a suspect in her husband's murder. A year and a half after his tragic death, a grand jury indicted her. And nearly 5 years later, a jury convicted her based solely on circumstantial evidence. There was no clear motive or physical proof linking her to the crime. Since her husband's passing, every day has been a living nightmare for Sandra. now 59. Sometimes, she still expects to go back home and catches herself wanting to share things with him, only to remember he's gone. In a recent interview, Sandra's blue eyes were red and puffy from crying. She said with tears streaming down her pale cheeks that it didn't feel like he was really gone, and that it was like he was just away on a trip. She paused, then continued that she tried not to dwell on it, and knew she would see him again. For the past 10 months, Sandra had been imprisoned at the William P. Hobby Unit, a women's prison in the Texas countryside. Sandra maintains contact with her friends and family, many of whom still believe she is innocent. Despite the difficulties of communicating in a noisy prison environment and her soft voice, she regularly talks to her daughter, Elizabeth Liz Melgar Rose. Sandra also writes letters to her friends, who keep her updated about her Pomeranian, Lola, who was at home on the night of the incident. Thanks to the efforts of one of her closest friends, Sandra gets to spend a couple of hours with a rotating group of friends and family every weekend. Her daughter Liz is her biggest supporter, acting as her spokesperson and passionately arguing that her mother's imprisonment is a grave injustice that has deprived her of both parents. Liz mentioned that she had never seen her mother so broken and devastated, and that she had never been able to recover from that. Sandra's husband Jamie met a tragic end on December 23, 2012. Sandra has no memory of that night, which has raised suspicions among investigators. However, she maintains her innocence, insisting she did not commit the crime. As Sandra sits in her prison cell, her thoughts often go back to the evening of their 32nd wedding anniversary, on December 23, 2012. That night, she and Jamie had celebrated together. Later, she was awoken by their barking dogs to find herself bound and gagged on the closet floor, her head throbbing and her body aching. Sandra tried to stretch her legs and peek through the gap under the closet door, but her bindings and 2 hip replacements limited her movement. Even if she could free herself, a chair blocked the door handle, preventing her escape. In the same closet, she would later discover her husband Jamie, lying lifeless with 31 stab wounds to his hands and chest. The white walls were now stained with blood, and a gray telephone cord was used to bind Jamie's feet. A medical examiner later determined that all of Jamie's injuries were defensive wounds, indicating that he had fought back against his attacker instead of trying to escape. One particularly vicious blow had nearly severed his right thumb, which likely contributed to the extensive blood splatters found in the closet and bedroom. The bedroom was in disarray, with dresser drawers open and clothes, books, and pill bottles scattered all over the floor. Sandra's purse and wallet had been rummaged through, and their contents were strewn across the blood-stained white comforter on the bed. A small white medical stool at the foot of the bed had blood stains on it, suggesting that it had been used as a makeshift surface for a knife during the attack. Nearby, a wooden chair had blood dripping down its back. The jacuzzi bathtub, where Sandra and Jamie had celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary just the night before, told a tragic story. A blood-stained white blouse, a green towel, and a silver chef knife with a 6-inch blade covered in blood droplets in every crevice were found in the bathtub, revealing the chilling details of the events that had unfolded. Police identified a knife as the murder weapon, a stark contrast to the joyful evening that had preceded it. Earlier that night, Sandra and Jamie had celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary with dinner at their favorite Mexican restaurant, planning to continue the celebration in their jacuzzi with candles, cocktails, strawberries, and whipped cream. After more than 3 decades together, Jaime and Sandra remained deeply in love, as Sandra would later tell the authorities. They had met in their senior year at Lamar High School, where Jamie was immediately smitten with the 17-year-old Sandra, who had blue eyes and blonde hair. Sandra was drawn to his sense of humor, intelligence, and kind nature, while Jamie admired her intelligence, down-to-earth personality, and humility. Before long, they became extremely close, and 2 years after graduating from high school, They got married in a simple ceremony at a courthouse in downtown Houston. On their anniversary, Sandra and Jamie relaxed in their jacuzzi, reflecting on their past and future. They dreamed of traveling, visiting the Grand Canyon, Ireland, and seeing the Northern Lights. With Jamie's retirement from the Houston Independent School District approaching, they envisioned a beachfront property to settle down after their adventures. Sandra and her husband Jamie spent a romantic evening together, giving each other massages and relaxing in the jacuzzi. However, their peaceful night was interrupted by their dogs barking. Jamie got out of the bathroom to take care of the dogs, and that was the last time Sandra saw him alive. Meanwhile, Jamie's brother Herman was waiting outside the house, wondering why no one was answering the door. Herman and his family had been invited over for dinner, but Jamie and Sandra weren't responding to calls or the doorbell. Herman found it strange, especially since Jamie's truck was still in the driveway and Sandra's car was parked in the open garage. Herman told his family to wait by the front door while he went to the backyard to take a look. He noticed a plastic tarp hanging from the pergola on the back porch, which was evidence of Jamie's recent DIY project. Herman then went back to the front yard and decided to check the laundry room door inside the garage. If it was locked, he thought they would leave, but to his surprise, the door was unlocked. He entered the house, finding it dimly lit, gray and stuffy, with all the blinds closed. As he opened the front door, the dogs started barking and jumping around, creating an unsettling atmosphere. That was when they heard muffled screams. Herman rushed to the back of the house and found a large chair blocking the closet door in the bathroom. Inside, he found Sandra lying on the floor in a black satin nightgown, screaming for help. Herman and his wife Maria worked to free Sandra from the tight restraints that bound her arms and legs. To help, Herman got a pair of scissors from the bathroom. Meanwhile, Sandra repeatedly asked, "Where's Jamie?" She had visible bruises on her arms, including a dark one on her left bicep. After Herman and Maria finally freed her, Sandra rushed into the bedroom and found Jamie's lifeless body hidden in the closet, his feet sticking out. Despite it being clear that he was dead, given his cold, pale, and naked body, she still checked for a pulse. Sandra put a blue jacket on her injured husband Jamie, and with Maria's help, got him back to the bathroom. When the paramedics arrived, Sandra was extremely distraught, making it hard for her to talk to the first paramedic, Stephanie Roberts. According to Roberts' report, Sandra was in shock, crying periodically, and had lost track of time. Her last clear memory was around 1 a.m., and she was unaware that 15 hours had passed. The police noticed bruises on Sandra's hands and arms, as well as a small scratch on her left thumb, but no visible blood. Sandra told the police that after Jamie let the dogs in, she got out of the bathtub and went to her closet to get dressed. Then, she claimed to have no memory until she woke up in the closet at an unknown time, eventually screaming for help, but possibly falling back asleep due to a seizure. Sandra had several serious medical conditions, including lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and grand mal seizures, which had forced her to resign from her job as a licensed vocational nurse. In the weeks leading up to Jamie's murder, Sandra experienced warning signs of an impending seizure, known as auras. After a seizure, she would sleep for hours, then wake up feeling disoriented, confused, and in pain. During the investigation, Sandra was questioned by Sheriff Sergeants Shah Kazal and James Duay at the Harris County Sheriff's Office. Sandra felt uncomfortable in the cold interrogation room and asked to take a polygraph test, despite feeling cold and shaky. The 3-hour interrogation focused on the 36 hours leading up to Jamie's death. Sandra spoke softly and complained of having a headache. She recalled specific details about her activities, such as removing her boots in the bedroom and their conversation in the jacuzzi. However, she struggled to remember other details, and her memory was unclear. Sandra initially said Jamie had left her alone for 15 minutes to let the dogs in before she got out of the jacuzzi. Later, she thought it might have been around 5 minutes. She admitted to being bad at keeping track of time, and was just making guesses about the timeline. When asked about their future plans, Sandra became overwhelmed and burst into tears. Carlson suggested that Sandra might have been involved in Jamie's death, which prompted Sandra to ask for a lawyer, saying she wasn't going to answer any more questions because she felt confused. Dewey asked Sandra if she would take a polygraph test, but she refused, citing concerns about her nervousness, physical symptoms, and the potential for the results to be used against her. She wanted to consult with a lawyer first. Dewey seemed frustrated by her refusal, implying that it suggested she had something to hide. He warned Sandra that the investigation would be thorough and that they would gather information about her, her husband, and their relationships with neighbors and family members. Sandra hoped the investigation would focus on someone else, insisting she wasn't involved in Jamie's murder. When asked about her relationship with her husband, she described it as great, even better lately. As the interrogation neared its end, the detectives grew frustrated with Sandra's claims of having no memory of the events. They pressed her, wondering how she could have been unaware of her husband being brutally stabbed in the bedroom just a few feet away, and why she hadn't heard his screams. Detective Carlson implored her to help, but Sandra repeatedly denied having heard anything, covering her face with her hands. Carlson and Dewey left the cold, confined room, leaving Sandra crying with her face in her hands. Later, Carlson contacted the Harris County District Attorney's Office to file murder charges against Sandra. However, the DA's office ultimately decided not to pursue those charges due to a lack of evidence. 2 days after the murder, Liz met with Carlson and Dewey, telling them that various items were missing from the house, including a TV and medication. She also shared information about her mother's health issues and seizures. Unfortunately, this meeting didn't lead to any significant breakthroughs in the case. Liz continued to call the authorities, asking about the progress of the investigation, but eventually, they stopped responding to her calls. A year and a half later, Sandra was quietly indicted for Jamie's murder by a grand jury. However, the grand jury proceedings were kept secret, leaving the public unaware of the discussions and evidence presented. Sandra's case moved slowly, passing from one prosecutor to another over the next 3 years. Finally, it landed on Colleen Barnett's desk in May 2017. Barnett was a seasoned prosecutor with a reputation for being diligent and fair. Despite the challenges in the case, including no apparent motive, no confession, and no direct evidence linking Sandra to the crime, Barnett believed in the case. During the 13-day trial, Barnett portrayed Sandra as a calculating murderer who had planned Jamie's death. She claimed that Sandra had tied Jamie's feet with a gray telephone cord and then stabbed him with a knife. Barnett also highlighted the presence of a bag of sex toys found on the bed, which Sandra later claimed was a gag gift from a friend. Although Barnett couldn't pinpoint a motive for Sandra's actions, she presented various theories, including Jamie's life insurance policy and Sandra's supposed desire to end their marriage. Sandra's attorney, George Sechrist, presented a different perspective on the case, arguing that Sandra was a victim of investigators who had prematurely settled on a theory. He claimed that the lack of physical evidence connecting Sandra to the crime, including the absence of her blood at the scene and cuts on her hands, suggested that she was not involved. Instead, Sechrist proposed that Sandra had fallen prey to a home invasion, suffered a head injury, and was bound in her closet while intruders killed her husband. Prosecutor Barnett countered with expert testimony from Celestina Rossi, a blood spatter analyst and crime scene reconstructionist. Rossi testified that the crime scene did not match a home invasion scenario, citing the lack of forced entry, undisturbed dresser drawers, and a lit candle on Jamie's nightstand, indicating no struggle near the closet where Jamie was killed. The majority of the blood was confined to the closet, with spatter on a chair, medical stool, and comforter, which Rossi attributed to the injury to Jamie's artery. Rossi concurred with the medical examiner's report that Jamie's wounds were defensive, and noted his loaded handgun near his body in the closet, untouched. This evidence, Rossi suggested, pointed to Sandra's guilt. The jury deliberated for 8 hours over several days before finding Sandra guilty of murder, sentencing her to 27 years in prison. The jury foreman later explained that they did not believe Sandra was a threat to society and wanted to give her a chance to see her grandchildren. When the verdict was read, Sandra let out a shriek and nearly collapsed into her seat. The courtroom, filled with supporters who believed in her innocence, was left in stunned disbelief. As Sandra was escorted out of the courtroom, she paused to embrace her daughter Liz one last time. Liz was devastated, feeling that the justice system had failed her family, taking away both her parents. Sandra's supporters were outraged at Barnett, accusing her of manipulating Sandra's words, exploiting her religious beliefs, and fabricating a false narrative that led to her imprisonment. In contrast, the jury foreman stood by the verdict, believing Barnett's version of events was the most plausible. He found Sandra's story inconsistent, citing her changing account of their return home and the time Jamie spent in the jacuzzi before she retreated to her closet. He also questioned the authenticity of her seizure that night, referencing her medical records, which indicated stable seizures, and her visit to the neurologist after the murder, during which she made no mention of the alleged seizure. The foreman stated that the more he listened to Sandra's statements, the more he realized they didn't make sense. He believed the evidence pointed to her guilt, but acknowledged that the jury could be wrong. A month after the verdict, Sandra's lawyer, Sechrist, filed a motion for a new trial, arguing that the investigation was inept, and the prosecution's case was built on conjecture and hypotheses with no solid evidence. Sechrist contended that Sandra was innocent, but Judge Johnson denied the motion, setting in motion a potentially lengthy appeals process. Sandra, seated behind a glass partition, maintained her innocence, softly asserting that she did not kill her husband. When asked who might have committed the crime, she replied, "I wish I knew." She clings to hope for a future release, whether through a successful appeal or parole, which she will be eligible for in 2031, when she will be 71 years old. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Chad Durman. Chad Durman, a 32-year-old man from Claremont County, Ohio, was married to 34-year-old Laura. They had a blended family with 3 young sons, Hunter 4, Clayton 3, and Chase 7, and a teenage stepdaughter, Alexis 16. Laura stayed at home to care for the children while Chad worked to support the family. On June 15, 2023, Chad arrived home from work earlier than usual and suggested taking a nap with his family. He invited Laura and their 3 sons to join him in their bedroom, where they spent some time laughing and chatting together. However, this joyful moment would soon turn into a horrific tragedy. After a few minutes, Chad got up and opened the gun safe next to their bed. He retrieved a MAR model HC-22 rifle, loaded it, and shot his 4-year-old son Hunter twice. The sound of the gunshot was heard by Alexis, who was watching TV in the family room. She rushed to the bedroom to see what had happened. As Alexis reached the doorway, she was met with a horrific scene, her brother being shot. Overcome with terror, she turned and fled as fast as possible. Meanwhile, Laura, who was with her kids, rushed to help her son Hunter, who had been injured. She yelled at the other children to run for their lives. Alexis saw the eldest boy fleeing in the wrong direction, towards a field, and shouted at him to keep running. Chad, however, was hot on his heels, and soon shot his own 7-year-old son, Clayton. As Clayton fell to the ground, bleeding severely, Chad stood over him, seemingly triumphant. Alexis witnessed this horror and was paralyzed with fear. She then turned and ran back into the house, grabbed her youngest brother, and fled to safety, desperate to save their lives. Chad pursued her, caught up, and pointed his gun at her, demanding that she hand over the 3-year-old, Chase. Alexis begged and pleaded with Chad to spare her life, but he tried to shoot her in the head, only to find he had run out of bullets. Alexis took advantage of the reprieve and escaped to the nearby fire station, where she frantically stopped a passerby to get help. At 4:15 p.m., a girl called 911 to report that her stepfather had killed everyone in her house. The police arrived at the scene 10 minutes later, at 4:25 p.m., and found Chad sitting on the porch with a rifle beside him. They quickly arrested him and placed him in handcuffs. Despite the chaos, Chad remained calm and didn't resist arrest. Meanwhile, his stepdaughter Laura was taken to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center to receive treatment for her injuries. Fortunately, Chad's stepdaughter Alexis had managed to escape from the house earlier that day, avoiding the fate of her 3 brothers, who were tragically killed by her stepfather. Chad was officially arrested at 4:27 p.m. on June 15, 2023. When the police took Chad into custody, he showed no signs of distress or remorse, instead behaving politely as though nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. He was later taken to jail for further questioning and investigation. During the interrogation, Chad confessed to police that he had been planning the murders since October 2022. Chad told investigators that he had gone without sleep for 3 to 4 days because the idea of harming his own sons was too much to bear. This admission provided a disturbing glimpse into his state of mind in the days leading up to the tragedy. Investigators also looked into whether Chad had a history of aggressive behavior. Chad's phone records were reviewed as part of the investigation, which revealed that he had a history of traffic violations in Claremont County, with one exception, a criminal damage incident that occurred when he was 18 years old. Additionally, a 2010 domestic violence case was discovered, in which Chad was accused of choking his father, Keith Derman. However, the case was eventually dropped due to Keith Derman's failure to appear in court as a witness for the prosecution. These records provided valuable insight into Chad's legal history and past dealings with law enforcement in the county. Meanwhile, one of Chad's neighbors, Richard Kanan, told a news channel that Chad was angry on a daily basis. The woman who called 911 also gave an interview to the news channel, describing how she was running with her little black lab and frantically screaming, "Call 911! Call 911!" during the incident. Chad's property tax records show that he was up to date with his payments until 2023, suggesting that he was not experiencing financial difficulties with his mortgage. When questioned by detectives, his 59-year-old father, Keith Derman, was left stunned and struggling to come to terms with the news. "I'm still trying to understand," he said. Keith Derman expressed his disbelief that his son could commit such a heinous crime. He also hinted that Chad was struggling with personal issues that had become too much to handle. The community was deeply shocked by the news of the killings, with neighbors expressing their surprise and stating that they never would have expected such actions from Chad. Initially, Chad confessed to the crimes during his interrogation, pleading guilty to all charges. However, during his first court hearing on June 23, 2023, he changed his plea to not guilty. At a subsequent hearing on the same day, Chad appeared visibly distraught, wearing a green bulletproof vest and breaking down in tears as prosecutors detailed the horrific events of June 15. The judge described the case as an act of unimaginable cruelty. The father, who stands before the court, intentionally murdered his 3 young sons, aged 3, 4, and 7, in his own home using a rifle. The chief prosecutor revealed that Chad meticulously planned the events, reflecting a disturbing premeditation. One of his sons attempted to escape by running away in a nearby field, but Chad chased and caught the boy, dragging him back to the yard where he was subsequently killed alongside his brothers. The trauma inflicted by this man on his family, the community, law enforcement, first responders, and society at large is unfathomable. While there has been a full admission of guilt, the case is still unfolding, and the full extent of the facts is still being discovered. However, the sheer horror of what is known so far is almost impossible to comprehend. Chad's murder of his own sons is one of the most horrific craven, and cowardly acts imaginable. According to the detailed bill of particulars filed in Clermont County, the judge was presented with a disturbing account of the events. The prosecutor read aloud the sequence of incidents that led to the tragedy. Chad deliberately planned and executed the killings, lining up his sons and shooting them. When their mother attempted to intervene, Chad shot her in the hand. The prosecutor revealed that Chad fired a total of 9 shots, causing devastating harm. One boy was hit once, while the other 2 were each struck 4 times. The prosecutor, Mark T.L., emphasized the brutality of Chad's actions, stating that the brutal killings left the family and community in a state of shock. Prosecutor Mark Talvey revealed that Chad Dorman confessed to the murder, saying, "I did it. Take me to jail. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have shot them." During the interrogation, Chad also pleaded guilty. As a result, Talvey is seeking the death penalty. In a statement to the media after the court hearing, Talvey expressed his outrage, calling the crime the most sickening and horrifying he has seen. He imagined the terror the victims felt as their father, who was supposed to protect them, murdered them. Talvey vowed to do everything in his power to ensure Chad Dorman spends the rest of his life in prison. He began by offering his deepest sympathy to the family for their unspeakable tragedy. Chad Dorman is accused of committing a horrific act of violence against his own family, resulting in the tragic deaths of his 3 young sons, Hunter, Clayton, and Chase. He faces 21 charges, including 9 counts of aggravated murder, 8 counts of kidnapping, and 4 counts of felonious assault, which could lead to the death penalty if convicted. The grand jury has indicted Dorman on these charges, and he is currently being held in the Clermont County Jail with a bail set at $20 million, the highest in the county's history. Dorman's lawyer has entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, claiming that he was suffering from a serious mental illness at the time of the killings. The lawyer argues that executing someone with a serious mental illness is cruel and unusual punishment, violating both the Ohio and U.S. constitutions. The prosecution has requested a mental evaluation, and a court date has been set for May 3, 2024, to discuss the lawyer's request. The defense has agreed to provide a report from a mental health expert by June 3, 2024, to support their claim. Meanwhile, a judge has ruled that Dorman's confession will be thrown out due to violations of his Miranda rights during police interrogation. The police failed to fully read him his rights and continued questioning him after he requested an attorney. Several witnesses, including police officers, have testified in court, describing their encounters with Dorman. One officer recalled that Dorman said, "Take me to jail," during the drive to the sheriff's office, while another officer remembered Dorman referencing the Bible during his interrogation, saying that he did not kill his wife. In this case, Chad expressed a desire for a lawyer during the interrogation, but the detective ignored him. When a suspect clearly requests a lawyer during a custodial interrogation, it's not the start of a test, but rather a signal for the officer to stop questioning them. However, Detective Ross failed to cease the questioning and even left Chad alone for a while before returning to continue the interrogation. During the court hearing, it was revealed that Detective Ross did not read Chad his full Miranda rights. When questioned about this, Ross admitted to not reading the rights verbatim, but claimed to have covered the most important parts. However, it was established that Ross had omitted crucial parts of the rights. Ultimately, the judge ruled that the investigators failed to follow proper procedures during Chad's arrest in June 2023, violating his Miranda rights. Chad's lawyers argued that during his 3-hour interrogation, Chad requested a lawyer at least twice, but the detectives disregarded his request and continued questioning him. Additionally, they claimed that Chad's earlier guilty plea was a result of intimidation by the investigators. The judge later ruled that the detectives failed to fully inform Chad of his rights before the interrogation. Thus, any statements made during that time would be inadmissible as evidence in future court proceedings. This ruling significantly impacted the trial, limiting the evidence that could be presented against Chad. The legal complexities and public interest in the case increased, with Chad facing a potential death penalty if convicted. His trial is scheduled to begin on July 8, 2024, but the recent ruling may change the course of the trial. A final court hearing is set for June 14th, just before the anniversary of the tragic events. The trial is expected to last from July 8th to August 2nd. However, the authorities are still unsure about the motive behind Chad's actions. The motive behind Chad's shooting of Clayton, Hunter, and Chase remains unknown, but some people believe it may have been an act of revenge against his 34-year-old wife, whom he suspected of infidelity. However, this motive has not been officially confirmed. Meanwhile, a memorial ride was held today to raise funds for the Dorman boys' family, with hundreds of people participating in the 15-mile ride through New Richmond. The event, which featured motorcycles, jeeps, and cars, attracted over 100 participants and was organized by Alan Easterday. The community came together to show their support for the family during this difficult time, while the boys' father awaits trial for their murder. The accused, Chad Dorman, is being held in custody at Claremont County Jail as the legal case against him continues. Many questions still linger, including what motivated him to commit such a heinous act against his own children. While the community is still searching for answers, they are holding on to hope that justice will be served and the truth will eventually come to light. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Agnes Klavina. Agnes Klavina was born on July 8, 1984, in Riga, the capital of Latvia. She was the younger of two daughters, with her sister Greta being only a couple of years older. As a result, the two sisters were extremely close and friendly. Their parents made every effort to provide their daughters with a good education and support their dreams. Agnes developed into a sociable, cheerful, and active individual. She excelled in school, participated in sports, and had many friends. Her future aspirations involved a career in tourism or entertainment, as she loved traveling and organizing leisure activities. With her striking appearance and impressive physique, Agnes consistently received attention and compliments from men. From a young age, Agnes had numerous admirers vying for her attention. Following her graduation from school, she worked in the service industry while taking language courses and studying tourism management. At the age of 20, Agnes relocated from Latvia to the United Kingdom, settling in London. She believed that this move would provide her with greater opportunities to unlock her full potential and showcase her talents. Parents and an older sister were supportive of her decision. After the move, Agnes met Michael Mills, an older man with a good education and a thriving business. He owned a small movie theater and entertainment complex and was considered successful. Agnes and Michael quickly hit it off and began dating. Michael showered Agnes with expensive gifts and they traveled together, making plans for their future. They were truly in love and happy, and it seemed like a long and prosperous life awaited them. According to those close to Agnes, this was her first true love. She glowed when she was with Michael and dreamed of becoming his wife. In 2014, Agnes was offered a 3-month contract as an administrator at a popular nightclub in Marbella, Spain. Although this meant a temporary move, Agnes didn't want to pass up the opportunity. Michael couldn't leave his job to go with her, but he didn't oppose her signing the contract. For Agnes, it was a chance to gain experience and potentially develop her career in a new field. Marbella is a renowned and appealing resort on the Mediterranean coast, attracting vacationers from worldwide, particularly affluent individuals seeking entertainment and luxury. It's a popular spot for celebrities, athletes, and business moguls. Agnes, being a sociable person, enjoyed working in such a vibrant environment. Before relocating, she visited her family in Latvia and shared the news about her 3-month employment contract. She also announced her plans to marry Michael after returning to England, which delighted her parents and sister. In late May 2014, Agnes moved to Spain with only the essentials, leaving her lover Michael in London. Despite the distance, they maintained daily communication through phone calls and video chats, keeping each other updated on their lives. Agnes Clavina was active on social media, where she shared daily updates about her life through photos, videos, and stories. As a result, she gained a large following of people who were interested in her activities and work. Her posts made it clear that she lived a busy, exciting life and made the most of every day. When her employment contract ended, Agnes decided to extend her stay in Spain for a few more months. It was the start of the peak tourist season in the resort town, and she saw an opportunity to earn a good income. After discussing her plans with her boyfriend, he gave her his support and promised to visit her for a few days. They had been apart for a long time and were eager to see each other. Agnes quickly found a new job as a hostess at an upscale restaurant and renewed her apartment lease. In September, her boyfriend, Michael, visited her as planned. They spent their time together having fun, making plans for their upcoming wedding, and researching honeymoon destinations. However, their time together was short-lived, as Michael returned to London less than a week later. Agnes was left to work in Spain for another month, after which she intended to visit her relatives in Latvia and then join Michael in England. Unfortunately, these plans were not meant to be fulfilled. On September 6th, Agnes went to the Costa del Sol nightclub with her friends. She had told her fiancé about her plans earlier, and he didn't object. At the club, they took pictures and had a good time, with Agnes posting some photos online that night. People who saw her that night remember Agnes wearing a short dress and carrying a small white handbag. As the night ended, Agnes told her friends she wanted to stay a bit longer and would take a taxi home. Her friends weren't worried because Agnes was responsible and hadn't had much to drink. As her friends left, Agnes was talking to a man who had bought her a cocktail. He seemed to be trying to win her over. After that, Agnes disappeared. Despite being in a crowded nightclub, no one saw her leave or knows where she went. The day after Agnes went missing, she failed to show up at work and her phone was turned off. Concerned colleagues and friends alerted the authorities, but the police were slow to act on their missing persons report. As the evening drew in, Michael, Agnes's worried fiancé, contacted her mother, explaining that he had been unable to reach Agnes all day, which was unprecedented. The following day, Agnes's parents and fiancé attempted to file a missing persons report with the Spanish police. However, they were informed that the report would only be considered if it was made in person. Consequently, Agnes's family and Michael flew to Marbella and filed the report 5 days after her disappearance. The investigation began with a search of Agnes's rented apartment. The property appeared as if Agnes had simply stepped out for a short time, with her belongings, including documents, money, and valuable jewelry, still intact. The fridge was stocked with prepared food, and several outfits were laid out on the bed, suggesting that Agnes had chosen what to wear to the club on her last night out. It was clear that Agnes had not returned to her apartment since leaving with her friends. Agnes's phone was switched off, and she stopped posting on social media. She also wasn't responding to any messages. At this point, the police started investigating her disappearance, but a significant amount of time had already passed. Her friends and family created flyers with her picture and distributed them across the city, asking for help in finding her. The media soon picked up the story, and Agnes's disappearance was featured on TV news and the front pages of local newspapers. The investigation advanced after police analyzed CCTV footage from inside and outside the entertainment venue. Although the files had been deleted, specialists were able to recover them. A parking lot exit camera recording showed Agnes being led out of the club around 6 a.m. by a man, apparently against her will. A closer examination of this footage, the last to show Agnes alive, revealed more disturbing details. A man of large build was leading Agnes, gripping her tightly around the waist. Agnes appeared frightened, attempting to break free several times and speaking emotionally. Despite her struggles, the man persisted, eventually forcing her into a Mercedes A63 with tinted windows in the parking lot. At the moment the large man pushed Agnes into the cabin, another man was already inside, while the first man went to the driver's seat. Agnes managed to open the door and tried to escape, but the doorman, standing next to her, intervened. The driver gestured and spoke, and the doorman pushed Agnes back into the car. The driver then handed the doorman something, likely a cash reward. About 6 minutes after Agnes entered the car, her phone was turned off and never turned back on. The vehicle's movement couldn't be tracked due to a lack of CCTV cameras. It became clear that the men in the cabin were the last to contact Agnes. The case was shrouded in secrecy from the start, with investigators signing non-disclosure agreements and information withheld from the press and Agnes's loved ones. 6 months after the incident, Agnes's relatives were shown footage from the club's cameras, which revealed the identities of the 3 men who had last been in contact with Agnes. The large man who forcibly removed her from the club and pushed her into a car was identified as Wesley Capper, the son of a wealthy and influential British millionaire. Also in the car were Craig Porter, a longtime friend of Capper's with no fixed occupation and a history of police attention, and Sean Usman, a dark-skinned doorman. During interrogation, Porter and Usman both claimed they were innocent, stating that Agnes had entered the car voluntarily. Capper's account was that he and a friend had spotted Agnes, a beautiful blonde, at the club and approached her to strike up a conversation. According to Capper, Agnes was already intoxicated, which contradicts the testimony of her friends. However, when offered a drink, she did not refuse. Capper then suggested continuing the party at his luxurious country house, and Agnes allegedly agreed. Agnes reportedly changed her mind about attending a private party at Wesley's house while already in the car. She asked to be dropped off on a dark stretch of road, saying she would take a taxi home. According to the driver, he dropped her off at the requested location, which had no streetlights or CCTV cameras. However, Craig Porter, another passenger, couldn't confirm or deny this account because he was also heavily intoxicated and didn't recall when Agnes was in the car. Craig claimed he fell asleep shortly after leaving the parking lot and didn't notice Agnes's departure. Sean Usman, the doorman, stated that Agnes was drunk but couldn't say if she entered the car voluntarily. He did confirm that when the car stopped, the blonde woman opened the door and almost fell out. Then, at the driver's request, the doorman slammed the car door shut, burning a substantial tip. When questioned, Usman said he didn't believe Agnes was trying to escape by jumping out of the car while it was moving. He thought she might have accidentally opened the door due to intoxication. He also mentioned that Agnes didn't scream or ask for help. However, footage showed Wesley Capper firmly holding Agnes by the waist and wrist, leading her to the car. Wesley claimed Agnes was dizzy, and he was supporting her to prevent her from falling. Later, investigators discovered another suspicious video taken at Soto Grande in southern Spain's Puerta de la Duquesa port. The video, dated September 10th, 4 days after Agnes's disappearance, showed Wesley, Craig, and 2 other men boarding John Capper's luxury yacht. They were carrying a large, heavy-looking suitcase and a rolled-up carpet. When the company returned to Puerta de la Duquesa port a few days later, they had no luggage. After watching the footage, Capper claimed that he and his friends sailed to Ibiza for fun. According to him, the suitcase contained their belongings, and what investigators thought was a carpet was actually bedding. However, he couldn't explain what happened to it afterward. A thorough search of Wesley's yacht and car yielded nothing, as both had been thoroughly cleaned and dry cleaned, eliminating any DNA evidence. Although a long blonde hair was found in a car's trunk, its origin couldn't be determined because the crucial evidence mysteriously disappeared during the investigation. At the trial, the prosecution revealed another peculiar detail. A few hours after Agnes was in the defendant's car, Capper made multiple calls to emergency services but hung up each time without waiting for an answer, as if he was afraid or unsure of his actions. Capper explained that he was drunk and made the calls randomly. The Clavin family's lawyer believed Agnes had been dead for some time, with her body likely on the seabed in the suitcase brought onto the yacht by the suspects. He also thought the case was intentionally delayed, allowing the suspects to eliminate any incriminating evidence. A year and a half after Agnes vanished, Capper, Porter, and Usman were in court, accused of holding her against her will and forcing her into a car. However, due to insufficient evidence, no additional charges could be brought. They were granted bail and discreetly left the courtroom. Agnes's family was understandably outraged, but the judge stood firm. It wasn't until 2019, nearly 5 years after Agnes's disappearance, that the three men were retried. They maintained their innocence, claiming Agnes had entered the car voluntarily. The prosecutor requested that the doorman, Usman, be considered an accomplice to the crime because he assisted the defendants in driving the victim, Agnes, away from the scene. This charge carried a potential 5-year prison sentence for Usman. In his defense, Usman delivered a passionate speech, claiming he was being targeted due to his skin color and inability to afford a good lawyer, as he sent all his earnings to support his impoverished family in Africa. In contrast, the lawyers for Capper and Porter argued that their clients were only guilty of convincing Agnes to get into the car, not of forcing her to do so. According to their version of events, Agnes was dropped off on the road at her request and was waiting for a cab to go home. They suggested that, while intoxicated and unable to defend herself, Agnes might have been kidnapped and killed by someone else. The judge's verdict shocked and outraged the family of the missing young woman because none of the defendants received significant punishment. Usman was acquitted of all charges, while Capper received a 2-year sentence for taking advantage of Agnes's intoxication to persuade her to get into his car. Porter was sentenced to 6 months for his role in the incident. However, both men received suspended sentences and did not serve any time in prison. Instead, they paid Agnes's family a compensation of 101,000 sterling, which was seen as a paltry sum. Agnes's family was disappointed with the outcome and appealed the decision. It was later revealed that both defendants had broken the law again while awaiting the court's decision. Capper, who was under the influence of alcohol and drugs, hit and killed a woman with his car and fled the scene. Porter and his friend, also intoxicated, stole a car after assaulting its owner. Despite the severity of these new crimes, Capper was only sentenced to probation thanks to his lawyer's effective defense. He paid a substantial amount in compensation to the family of the woman he killed but remained free. Porter was less fortunate this time and did go to jail. In 2021, nearly 7 years after Agnes's disappearance, the main suspect faced punishment. Wesley had spent years living a self-destructive lifestyle, excessively consuming alcohol and illicit substances, which severely impacted his health. He was hospitalized and, after seeming to recover, suddenly suffered a stroke. Capper passed away on July 26, 2021, at the age of 44. Around this time, Agnes's parents submitted another appeal to the court. However, since the suspect was now deceased, prosecution was no longer possible. Despite the Supreme Court's pending decision in this complex case, an unexpected development occurred 9 years later. Although Agnes Clavina's body was never found, she was presumed dead. Later, her family, including her parents, sister, and fiancé, accepted their lawyer's theory that the perpetrators had disposed of Agnes's body in a suitcase, which was then loaded onto a yacht and discarded at sea, making it impossible to recover. Nevertheless, in the summer of 2023, 9 years after Agnes vanished, the case took a surprising turn. In mid-June, a gardener at the elite Lita Golf Club in Costa del Sol discovered a mysterious object while cleaning near the coast. Upon closer inspection, it was an old, damaged suitcase. The gardener did not open it and instead called the police. Authorities found human remains inside the suitcase, later identified as belonging to a young woman aged 25 to 35 at the time of death. Further investigation revealed that the suitcase had been in the water for around 10 years before washing the shore. Based on this information, police suspected that the remains might belong to Agnes Clavina, who went missing 9 years ago. To confirm this, experts are currently conducting DNA tests to compare Agnes's DNA with the remains found. The investigation is ongoing, and details have not been made public. If the suspicions are confirmed, the case will be reopened, and surviving suspects will face trial. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Wang Nan. Wang Nan was born in 1987 in Guangzhou, China, a major city and former capital. She came from a relatively affluent family, and her parents provided her with the best possible education, fostering her talents and potential. Wang Nan excelled academically, particularly in the sciences. After completing her secondary education, she enrolled in a prestigious university, studying business and finance fundamentals while mastering multiple foreign languages. Upon graduation, she landed a job at a large travel agency, where she established herself as a valuable, responsible, and highly motivated employee. Her career progressed rapidly, and she was soon assigned to Thailand to lead and develop a new branch. Wang Nan was a high-achieving manager at a travel agency, but she left to pursue her own business venture. She opened a Chinese restaurant in Bangkok, which quickly grew into a popular chain under her leadership. As a successful entrepreneur, Wang effectively managed and expanded her business. However, her professional success came at the cost of her personal life. Her last romantic relationship was during her university days, and once she started working, she had no time for dating due to her demanding schedule. Wang, nearing her 30th birthday, wasn't worried about her solitary life, consumed by her business. To improve her Thai skills, she enrolled in courses at a training center. There, she met Yu, who caught her attention by staring before approaching her in Thai. They briefly conversed, and Yu asked why she was studying Thai. Wang replied it was essential for her business growth. Yu proposed that they exchange business cards so they could arrange to meet again. As a courtesy, Wang gave him her card, and he gave her his in return. According to his card, Yu was involved in the export-import trade in Bangkok, but this information didn't make a significant impression on Wang, who simply put the card in her purse and forgot about it. In contrast, Yu seemed truly interested and followed up by calling Wang the very next day. However, she was too preoccupied with work at that time and politely turned down his invitation to meet for coffee. A few days later, the situation recurred. Wang declined another date, citing her busy schedule and preparations for a business conference where she aimed to expand her professional network. However, Yu appeared at the event, bearing a lavish bouquet of flowers. He waited for Wang to become available, then approached her and asked her out again. Wang was won over by Yu's persistence, as no one had ever pursued her so fervently. She agreed to dinner, marking the beginning of an unexpected romance. Yu fell deeply in love with Wang, showering her with attention, surprises, and gifts. He sent flowers and sweet notes every morning and called her twice a day. Wang's feelings were mixed, irritated by his intensity but flattered by his efforts. She found herself in a romantic relationship again, swept up by his wooing. Wang Nan was thrilled to discover that Yu shared her passions and hobbies. To win her heart, Yu made an effort to learn how to cook her favorite meals and surprised her with tickets to thrilling events. Not only was Yu charming, but he was also very supportive, always willing to lend a hand whenever Wang Nan needed it, whether at work or at home. Wang Nan felt like she was on cloud nine, but one thing bothered her. After just a few months of dating, Yu was already talking about getting married and even suggesting names for their future kids. Wang Nan was taken aback by Yu's eagerness, but he justified it by pointing out that they were both in their 30s and it was time to start a family. Wang Nan was unsure how to respond, feeling uncertain about Yu's suitability as a life partner. After a heart-to-heart conversation, where Wang Nan expressed her doubts, Yu vowed to prove his love. That night, he sent her a heartfelt letter, reaffirming his commitment to being a devoted husband and father. In the morning, Wang found Yu waiting on her doorstep with a bouquet of flowers. He proclaimed his serious intentions and readiness to marry her immediately. Wang Nan joked that the courthouse wouldn't be open for another hour and a half. However, Yu suggested going there right away, and if it was open, they would register their marriage on the spot. Wang agreed, confident that the courthouse would be closed. But to her surprise, they found it open, and the officer was already at his desk, ready to register their marriage registration. It was revealed that Yu had made prior arrangements, requesting a special exception to formalize their marriage early in the morning. The wedding was unusual, with no guests, rings, wedding dress, or photos. Wang couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't real, especially since she hadn't introduced Yu to her mother, with whom she was very close. Before she knew it, she was holding a marriage certificate. Wang and Yu had a troubled family life. Wang regretted her marriage almost immediately after it was registered. Initially, she had hoped that Yu would be a good husband and a reliable partner. However, her hopes were soon dashed as Yu revealed his true nature. He spent most of his time at home playing video games, using his wife's money, and contributing nothing to the household income. When Wang asked him why he didn't work, Yu claimed that his business was experiencing a seasonal downturn and that he could take a break. However, this downturn had been ongoing for an extended period, prompting Wang to investigate her husband's business. She discovered that his supposed export-import business was merely a facade, existing only on paper and business cards. At that moment, Wang realized the gravity of her mistake in not creating a prenuptial agreement. This meant her husband, Yu, had the freedom to spend her earnings as he pleased and could claim her property in the event of a divorce. They had a heart-to-heart conversation, during which Yu broke down in tears, promising to turn his life around and find employment. However, it soon became apparent that he had no intention of looking for a job and was content to rely on his wife's financial support. Yu, a grown man, regularly behaved immaturely, devoting most of his time to playing computer games. On the rare occasions when he helped with household chores or assisted his wife at their restaurant, he would request money from her for personal expenses. Wang eventually reached her limit and informed Yu she wouldn't give him any more money until he secured employment. The next day, following this conversation, Yu vanished, taking their marriage certificate and Wang's identity card with him. It wasn't until the evening, when Wang received a call from her accountant inquiring about a large sum of money transferred from her account, that she realized the item were missing. She was shocked, as she hadn't authorized any transfers, but she immediately suspected Yu. The transferred amount exceeded $500,000, which Yu had moved into his personal account by providing the bank with their marriage certificate, Wang's documents, and a claim that the money was jointly managed. Wang immediately reported the theft to the police, and her husband, Yu, was tracked down a few hours later when he tried to withdraw some of the stolen funds. Yu broke down in tears and begged for his wife's forgiveness, revealing that he had accumulated a large debt due to his gambling addiction and was being threatened. It was also revealed that Yu had a previous run-in with the law, having served an 8-year prison sentence for robbery in China. Wang was both shocked and ashamed, realizing she was not as familiar with her husband as she had thought. Despite this, she viewed gambling as an illness and felt driven to support her husband in overcoming his addiction and resuming a normal life. Wong not only agreed to pay off half of Yu's debt but also offered him a job as a manager at one of her restaurants. Initially, Yu seemed grateful and took his new role seriously, even devising a successful strategy for the restaurant's development. However, his enthusiasm was short-lived, and he soon began spending more time playing computer games and engaging in other leisure activities. During that time, Wong found out she was pregnant and told her husband, Yu. However, he reacted strangely and aggressively, saying he wasn't ready for a child and wanted her to have an abortion. Wong refused, and Yu threatened to divorce her and divide their property through the court. He didn't speak to her for several days but then apologized and changed his behavior. Yu explained that he had said hurtful things in the heat of the moment but was actually happy about the pregnancy. He started showing care and helping out around the house again. 2 months later, Wong was happy because her marriage had improved, and Yu was being attentive and responsible. He was preparing their home for the arrival of the baby and doing his job as a manager. One day, Yu suggested getting life and health insurance for Wong because of her pregnancy, to protect her and the baby in case of unexpected events. Wong agreed and wondered why she hadn't thought of it earlier. They got the insurance the next day, and a couple of weeks later, Yu suggested taking a vacation to relax and unwind. Wong was initially hesitant about taking a trip, but her husband persuaded her by pointing out that they had never had a honeymoon and would soon be too busy with their baby to travel. He also emphasized that they needed a break to clear their minds after a tough period. Eventually, Wong agreed to the trip. Her husband took charge of planning the trip, choosing the destination, booking the hotel, and organizing activities to ensure a balance of excitement, education, and relaxation, given Wong's pregnancy. Wong was happy to let him handle everything and was pleased to see how enthusiastic he was about their vacation. On June 7th, they arrived at the park and spent the day exploring, taking in the beautiful views and sights. As it was a summer Friday evening, the park was crowded with visitors. As the evening wore on, Wong noticed that her husband was becoming increasingly agitated and nervous. When she asked if everything was okay, he replied that the large crowds of tourists were ruining their chances of a peaceful and private sunset viewing. Wang Nan eventually agreed that it would be romantic to watch the sunset, as the park would become less crowded as the sun dipped below the horizon. Yu climbed over the fence of the observation deck and called out to his wife, telling her about the breathtaking view. However, Wang refused to join him, citing the darkness and potential danger. Yu became angry but returned to her after a few minutes. He suggested that they should come back to the park to watch the sunrise instead. Since they returned to their hotel well past midnight, they decided to sleep in on Saturday and head back to the reserve early on Sunday morning. On Sunday, June 9th, a couple, Yu and Wang, visited the national park to watch the sunrise. They woke up at 3 a.m. and arrived at the park while it was still dark, finding the area mostly deserted. From an observation deck, they admired the dawn. Afterwards, Yu went down to a cliff and encouraged Wang to join him to see the rock paintings. Wang was hesitant, but Yu assured her it was safe and promised to help her down and then climb back up. She trusted him and cautiously approached the cliff. The view was breathtaking. Yu hugged Wang and asked if she had any regrets in life. She replied confidently that she didn't. Yu then ran his hand through her hair, kissed her cheek, and leaned in to whisper, "Die." He loosened his grip and pushed Wang down the cliff. He checked to ensure no one was watching, looked down but couldn't see where she had fallen. There was only silence, indicating no one had seen or heard anything. Yu walked calmly towards the park exit, intending to report the incident only after Wang was surely dead. However, a few hikers who had wandered off the trail spotted Wang's body on the rocks and quickly called for rescue. As Yu left the reserve, several emergency vehicles with flashing lights and sirens sped past him. Realizing what was happening, he returned to the scene where his wife had fallen. Upon his return, Yu put on a dramatic display of grief, crying and screaming for help. Convinced that Wang was already dead, he thought no one would uncover the truth. But, as it turned out, Wang's fall was cushioned by tree branches, bushes, and rocks, which slowed her descent and saved her life, as well as the life of her unborn child. Though she suffered serious injuries, Wang suddenly opened her eyes and attempted to speak. Her husband's initial horror was evident to everyone present, but he quickly regained composure, leaned in close to Wang, and whispered in Chinese that she should remain silent if she wanted to live. Wang suffered severe injuries, including head trauma, multiple fractures, internal organ damage, and significant blood loss. Her spine was also badly damaged, leading doctors to worry that she might never walk again. She spent several days in a coma, during which her husband, Yu, stayed by her side. However, whenever he was alone with her, he thought about how to end her life without arousing suspicion. When Wang regained consciousness, Yu was extremely nervous, fearing she would reveal the truth to the police. He refused to leave her alone, even for a moment. Whenever he had the opportunity, he threatened her, claiming he had nothing to lose. Initially, Wang corroborated Yu's account, attributing her fall to dizziness. However, when Yu briefly left her side, Wang asked a nurse to call the police and prevent Yu from re-entering the room. It was then that she revealed the shocking truth, alleging that her husband had attempted to kill her. Yu burst into the room, claiming his wife was insane due to a head injury and that he would never hurt her or the baby. However, his words lacked conviction, and he was taken into custody at the hospital that same day. He faced multiple charges, including attempted murder and intimidation, for trying to silence his wife. Initially, Wang had hoped to save her pregnancy, as the baby had survived the fall. However, the doctors advised an abortion due to the strong painkillers, multiple surgeries under general anesthesia, and the need for antibiotics. They prioritized Wang's life, as the fetus would likely not survive the effects of the medication. This news was devastating for Wang, but she followed the doctor's advice. Yu consistently denied his guilt and maintained that the event was an accident. In prison, he remained calm and hired skilled lawyers, confident that he could avoid or minimize punishment. Investigators and the prosecutor were convinced that he committed the crime out of self-interest, seeking a substantial insurance payout and his wife's significant fortune of nearly $2.5 million. However, during one interrogation, Yu stunned everyone by revealing another motive for his heinous act. He harbored resentment towards his wife, Wang, for agreeing to only pay off half of his debt, which he accumulated due to his gambling addiction. Yu believed that if his wife truly loved him, she would have covered all of his debts, given her financial means. He concluded that Wang did not love him and felt justified in punishing her. In March 2021, Yu was convicted and received a life sentence. However, Song and his lawyers submitted multiple appeals. 6 months later, the Thai court reduced the sentence to 33 years in prison, showing unusual leniency. Wang and her loved ones were shocked, arguing that such a light sentence would set a bad precedent and potentially encourage others to commit similar horrific crimes. In Yu's case, his relatives claimed that he was a wealthy businessman and that Wang married him for selfish reasons. However, this claim cannot be proven as Yu has nothing but huge debts. As for Wang, despite the doctor's predictions, she was able to recover after undergoing a series of complicated surgeries and a long rehabilitation process. She learned to walk again and spent most of her earnings on her recovery. In 2023, Wang returned to work and was able to revive her once successful business. She also founded an organization dedicated to helping women who are victims of domestic violence and runs her own blog, where she shares her experiences and warns women against making the same mistakes she did. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nicole Peets. Nicole Peets was born on February 26, 1973, in King County, Washington. Her parents, who later divorced while Nicole was still in school, had her as their only child together. During her high school years, Nicole was a lively and sociable individual who participated in sports and had a charming personality. She had many friends and enjoyed trips to the countryside, with Lake Sammamish, located east of Seattle, being her favorite vacation spot. She spent her summer vacations there every year. After high school, Nicole attended Western Washington College, where she studied public relations. Alongside her studies, she continued to engage in sports and maintained an excellent physical shape. She decided to turn her passion for sports into a career and landed a job as a trainer at a local sports club. There, she quickly earned the respect of her colleagues and gained a loyal client base who regularly attended her group classes. At the same time, Nicole pursued higher education in management and eventually secured a job at a major mobile communications company. Outwardly, Nicole appeared to be a friendly and sociable person who was always willing to help others. However, few people realized that she was hiding a great deal of pain and misery behind this facade. As a teenager, Nicole struggled with addiction after her parents got divorced. This event was traumatic for her fragile and still developing psyche, leading her to rebel and seek solace in bad company and alcohol. Unfortunately, this led to a severe addiction that lasted for several years and had a devastating impact on Nicole's physical and mental health. Her mother, Gail, was often away from home due to her demanding job as a flight attendant and didn't notice the warning signs. Nicole lived with her elderly grandmother, who also didn't initially realize that her granddaughter was regularly consuming alcohol. By the time the truth came to light, the damage had already been done. Fortunately, Nicole's mother was there to support her. Gail not only arranged for Nicole to receive therapy but also attended AA meetings with her, helping her to open up and overcome her addiction. By that time, Gail had remarried, and her new partner, Rod, was very supportive of Nicole. He treated her like his own daughter and believed she could overcome her addiction. Nicole took therapy seriously, attending every session, and soon overcame her addiction. However, the effects of alcohol on her health were significant. Nicole developed severe pancreas problems, requiring surgery. More devastatingly, her early alcohol abuse damaged her reproductive system, rendering her unable to have children. After overcoming her addiction in the mid-1990s, Nicole met her future husband, David, at her new job at a sports club. David, a regular at the club, was a tall, handsome young man who was diligent about his fitness routine. He was immediately drawn to Nicole, and she, too, noticed the attractive young man and became interested. Although David was 4 years younger than Nicole, the age difference did not bother them. The relationship between Nicole and David gradually developed into a romantic one, which lasted almost 8 years before they got married in 2002. Their intimate wedding ceremony in Hawaii was attended only by their closest friends and family. After exchanging their vows, they moved to a quiet town called Linwood in Washington State, where they bought a home and began their new life together. Nicole was known for being sociable, friendly, and had a talent for building relationships. She quickly formed close bonds with the neighbors and had a passion for animals, with multiple dogs being part of the family. Because unable to have children of her own, she directed her maternal instincts towards her pets. David and Nicole were viewed as the epitome of a happy married couple, with a seemingly perfect relationship that brought them joy. One of Nicole's many hobbies was cooking, and she excelled at it. She delighted her husband and impressed guests with her culinary skills, taking pleasure in sharing meals and company with those she loved. Tragedy struck when Nicole disappeared on the eve of her 33rd birthday in 2006. Nicole failed to report to work and was unreachable by her family throughout the day. Her mother, Gail, tried to contact her but was unsuccessful, prompting her to alert David, Nicole's husband, to see if he knew what was going on. However, David had also been unable to reach Nicole. When questioned, David revealed that he and Nicole had argued the previous day, and when she didn't answer her phone the next day, he assumed she was still upset. He waited until evening to attempt to apologize, only to realize Nicole was still missing. It wasn't until the evening of the second day, when Nicole still hadn't contacted her family and her phone was still unreachable, that the police decided to launch a search. They began by investigating the last known location where Nicole was seen, her home with David. An investigation of the room where Nicole Peets was last seen found no signs of evidence of kidnapping. The absence of her personal car suggested that she might have simply left on her own. The family turned to social media to spread the word and ask for help in finding their daughter. They also immediately flew to Linwood, where they started their own search efforts. They put up posters with her picture and spoke to people who knew her, hoping someone might have information about her whereabouts. The police searched for Nicole and her car, trying to determine the route she took on the day she disappeared. Tragically, the worst fears were confirmed a few days later when a jogger discovered a young woman's body in a local park area. The jogger had taken an unusual route that morning. It was there that he stumbled upon something suspicious in the shrubbery, which turned out to be a brutally mutilated, naked body. The police were immediately notified, and forensic experts suggested that the crime was violent due to the presence of severe blunt force trauma and the lack of clothing. The autopsy revealed extensive bruising, abrasions, and blunt force injuries, indicating that the victim had been severely beaten before her death. The cause of death was asphyxiation by strangulation, and it appeared that the killer had used their bare hands. Police initially believed the body they found was that of Nicole Peets, a young woman who had gone missing several days earlier and had been the subject of a citywide search. Her identity was confirmed by her family as Nicole. When Nicole's mother, Gail, saw her daughter's body at the morgue, she was overcome with grief and needed medical attention. Her husband, Rod, was also devastated, but his reaction seemed a bit unusual to some. He didn't seem truly distraught and his emotions seemed forced. However, at that time no one paid much attention to this, because everyone coped with the tragedy in their own way. Police believed the missing car was the primary target of the attack and would hold key evidence. They released a description of the gray Volkswagen Polo to the media, asking for tips. Weeks later, a security guard found the car in a parking lot on the outskirts of the city, noticing it had been parked there for an extended period. The police took the car for a thorough examination, hoping to find evidence and clues that would lead them to the perpetrator and help reconstruct the crime scene. However, their search yielded nothing. The only fingerprints and DNA found in the car belonged to Nicole and her husband, who occasionally drove the vehicle. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, the investigators were reluctant to return the car to David. In addition, the victim's lack of clothes raised questions. The numerous injuries suggested a rage-driven attack, possibly a personal vendetta. However, Nicole was known for her kind nature and had no known enemies. The investigation into this complex case was on the verge of going cold, with no new leads or directions to pursue after nearly a year. The lack of witnesses and surveillance cameras in the parking lot where the car was abandoned made it difficult to gather evidence. However, one peculiar detail stood out. The driver's seat was positioned in a way that suggested the person driving the car was significantly taller and larger than the victim. The police obtained footage from the gas station security cameras, but the contents remained unclear. Frustrated by the lack of progress and the fact that the killer was still at large, Nicole's parents took matters into their own hands. They hired a private investigator to gather information and verify their suspicions, and offered a $10,000 reward to anyone who could provide useful information about the case. David, the husband of the victim, initially showed interest in the investigation, but his enthusiasm waned after 6 months. He eventually remarried, having a child with his new wife. This news was devastating for Gail, the victim's mother, as her daughter had been unable to have children, and David had often criticized her for this. Gail repeatedly suggested that David might be the culprit, but many people believed Gail was motivated by resentment. The police seemed to dismiss this theory altogether. However, 6 years after the crime, David was taken into custody as the prime suspect. One unusual circumstance was a gas station security footage that captured a man using Nicole credit card. The footage appeared to show a man resembling David, but he wore a head covering and dark glasses, making a positive identification impossible. Although this recording was not definitive proof, it was still added to the case file. Another discrepancy was the missing wedding ring, which Nicole never removed from her finger. Initially, investigators believed the killer might have taken it, but they found the ring in a box on the dressing table in Nicole's home. During the examination of Nicole's body, experts found a dental mouth guard in her mouth. This device was specifically designed to prevent teeth grinding, a condition known as bruxism, which Nicole experienced during sleep. The mouth guard had been prescribed to her shortly before her death due to her nervousness, which caused involuntary muscle spasms in her jaw. These spasms had led to the erosion of her tooth enamel and chipping of her teeth. The investigation concluded that Nicole was likely killed in her own bed while she was still asleep. This theory was supported by the fact that she was not wearing any clothes and her body was clean, with no signs of a struggle. Additionally, Nicole's face was free of makeup. The mouth guard found at the scene was not a significant factor, as Nicole had only recently started using it. Moreover, forensic experts analyzed the driver's seat in the car and found that the last person to sit behind the wheel had the same physical characteristics as David, Nicole's husband. The car only had fingerprints belonging to David and Nicole, suggesting that no one else had been in the vehicle. A crucial discovery was made possible by advances in technology. The killer had attempted to mislead the investigation by using Nicole's phone in various parts of the city. However, at the same locations and times, David's phone was also active, revealing a suspicious coincidence. Furthermore, it was discovered that David had a motive for the crime, and the seemingly perfect family was actually facing a severe crisis. Nicole was juggling multiple responsibilities, studying, working 2 jobs, and supporting others struggling with addiction. Meanwhile, her husband led a carefree life, unable to hold down a job and spending most of his time in bars and clubs. He would often use Nicole's earnings to fund his nightlife, including affairs with other women. Nicole tried to intervene in her husband's addiction, suggesting AA meetings, but he dismissed her concerns. The situation worsened as David's infidelity was revealed. After Nicole's sudden and mysterious death, David hastily filed for a large insurance payout and began a new relationship. It was later discovered that David had been having an affair with a woman named Jane for several months prior to Nicole's death. While Nicole was working or studying, David would often meet Jane at bars and clubs. Just before Nicole's birthday, David brought Jane to their home, where Nicole unexpectedly walked in on them. This led to a heated argument between Nicole and David. Nicole confided in her mother about the incident just days before she mysteriously vanished. Gail had her suspicions about her son-in-law from the start, but the police claimed they didn't have enough evidence to arrest him. As a result, the case was closed, and the family was left in the dark about the investigation. Over time, they lost hope that the person responsible would be held accountable. After his wife's death, David received a significant insurance payout, which he spent on lavish gifts for his mistress, Jane. Gail believed that Jane might have been involved in the crime, but she was only questioned as a witness due to lack of evidence. In 2013, David went to court, still denying any involvement in his wife's death. His lawyers initially argued that the evidence against him was circumstantial and not conclusive. However, as the prosecution presented more incriminating evidence, the defense shifted their strategy. They portrayed David as a victim, suggesting that his wife, Nicole, had become unbearable to live with due to her addiction to pain pills and drinking. The claims that Nicole was unstable were unfounded and disputed by everyone who knew her. Even if she had lost control, that would not have justified David's brutal murder of his wife. Ultimately, David's guilt was proven beyond a doubt, and he received the maximum sentence allowed by state law. David was sentenced to 18 years in prison, but he will be eligible for parole in 2025 after serving 2/3 of his sentence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lori Vallow. Lori Vallow was born on June 26, 1973, in Loma Linda, California. She grew up in a large family with 2 older brothers and 3 sisters. Her parents, Denise and Barry Cox, worked hard to provide for their children. Lori was especially close to her brother Alex, who always looked out for her and protected her, even during her school years. As she grew older, Lori became a beautiful and charismatic young woman with many admirers. She was a blonde with a slender figure and a captivating smile. She enjoyed being the center of attention and was a spirited and adventurous person. In the spring of 1992, at the age of 18, Lori married her high school sweetheart, Nelson Yanes. However, the young couple soon realized they had rushed into marriage and were not ready for family life. As a result, their marriage ended in less than a year. They did not have any children together. In the fall of 1995, Lori remarried, this time to a man named William Leah. A year later, they had a son named Colby. However, their marriage ended in 1998, just 2 years later. Lori retained custody of her son. In 2001, Lori married Joseph Anthony Ryan, who adopted her son from a previous marriage the following year. They also had a daughter, Tylee. However, this marriage ended in 2005. Shortly after, Joseph visited their children and got into an altercation with Lori's brother, Alex. Alex claimed he was defending Lori's honor, as Joseph had insulted her. As a result, Lori was fined and received a short prison sentence. After her divorce, Lori met Charles Anthony Vallow and married him in February 2006. Charles was 17 years older than Lori, but this significant age difference didn't pose a problem for they. Charles had 2 teenage sons, Zachary and Nicholas, from previous relationships. The family initially lived in Nevada, where Lori's children from previous marriages resided, while Charles's sons visited during holidays or weekends. Charles owned a small business that provided a stable income to support the family. Lori did not work, but Charles never criticized her for it. In 2014, they officially adopted Charles's grandnephew, Joshua Jackson Vallow, also known as JJ, who had autism. The family was able to provide JJ with the expensive therapy he needed. By the end of 2014, the family decided to move to the Hawaiian Islands. By this time, Colby and Charles's older children were living on their own, so the Vallow family moved to the island with just the 4 of them, Lori, Charles, Tylee, and JJ. They settled in a popular tourist area and decided to open a beach bar, specializing in fresh juices, smoothies, and non-alcoholic cocktails. Despite their efforts and Charles's experience in trade, the business struggled to compete and ultimately failed. Around this time, Lori developed an interest in spiritual literature and became particularly drawn to a series of books called Standing in Holy Places by Chad Daybell. She was deeply captivated by his views and ideas, becoming almost obsessed with his writings, and began reading his books daily. In 2016, Lori Vallow and her family were forced to leave Hawaii and relocate to the mainland, eventually settling in Arizona. While her husband Charles worked hard to provide for the family, Lori became increasingly obsessed with her faith, drifting away from reality. 2 years later, in October 2018, Lori and her friend Melanie attended a seminar called Preparing People for the Second Coming of Christ in a nearby town, led by Chad Daybell. Lori was a huge fan of Daybell and was thrilled to meet him in person. She sat in the front row, captivated by his words, and caught his attention. After the event, Daybell engaged with his followers, and Lori stayed behind to talk to him. She was drawn to him and asked if she could touch his hand. Daybell, looking into her eyes, told her that they had been husband and wife in 7 past lives. Chad and Lori started communicating regularly a few weeks after exchanging contact information. When Lori's husband traveled to Nevada for work, Lori invited Chad to host a gathering at her home, which drew around a dozen people. They discussed God and the Judgment Day. Lori and Chad began working together to prepare people for what they believed would be a catastrophic judgment. They started producing podcasts, leading sermons, and writing articles on the topic. As Lori became more engrossed in her newfound faith, she began to detach from reality and her family. Charles didn't immediately realize the full extent of the change, believing it to be a passing phase that would soon go away. However, by the time Charles realized the severity of the situation, it was too late. Lori's beliefs became increasingly extreme, and she started talking about battling dark spirits and zombies. She claimed that God had chosen her for a special mission to destroy these evil entities. Charles's efforts to bring his wife back to reality were unsuccessful, and she started to view him as a malevolent entity that needed to be eliminated. By the end of 2018, the marriage between Lori and Charles was on the verge of collapse. In February 2019, while Charles was away on a week-long business trip, Lori changed the locks on their shared home. When Charles returned, he found himself locked out of his own house, his personal car and family truck were missing, and a significant amount of $35,000 had been withdrawn from his account. Charles tried to enter the house, calling out for his wife, but Lori, in a frantic state, rushed outside, shouting threats and curses. She claimed that her husband's soul had long been dead, and his body was possessed by a demon, repeatedly saying, "I don't know who you are and what you've done with my husband." Charles immediately went to the police station to report Lori for stealing from him, blocking access to his home and children, and threatening him with physical harm. As a result, a protective order was issued, which prohibited Lori from approaching him. During the police interview, Charles expressed concerns about Lori's extreme religious behavior, her claims that the world was ending soon, and her tendency to label people as either good or evil. Although the officers seemed skeptical and even made fun of Charles, they still issued the protective order. The next day, Charles filed for divorce and changed the beneficiary of his $1 million life insurance policy from Lori to his mother and sister. According to his lawyer, Charles was worried about the well-being of his son JJ, who needed special care. He trusted that his mother and sister would manage the insurance payout responsibly and take care of JJ if anything happened to him. Months later, in an attempt to reconcile with his wife Lori and salvage their marriage, Charles made a critical error. He dropped the restraining order that had been protecting him. As a result, Charles began visiting Lori at her home, driven by a desire to reconnect with his children and revive his relationship. Tragically, on July 11, 2019, Charles's bid at reconciliation ended in disaster. When he arrived at the house, he was shot twice in the chest and killed. Lori's brother, Alex, admitted to the shooting and called 911. He claimed he acted in self-defense, alleging that Charles had attacked him first with a baseball bat. According to Alex, he responded by firing his pistol twice without taking aim. Witnesses to the shooting included the homeowner and the children. Although their testimonies were slightly inconsistent, the court ultimately ruled Charles's death an unintentional killing in self-defense. It's worth noting that Alex sustained only minor injuries. On the same day Charles's body was taken to the morgue, Lori hosted a party at their house, complete with music, numerous guests, and a poolside disco in the exact spot where her husband had been shot, with visible bloodstains still present. Strangely, she made no arrangements for his funeral and didn't inform anyone about his death. It wasn't until a week later, when Charles's unclaimed body remained in the morgue, that his sons, mother, sister, and other relatives learned of his passing. Lori's life took a dramatic turn after her husband's death. She sold their home in Arizona and moved to Rexburg, Idaho, with her children. They settled in the same housing complex as her brother Alex Cox and his wife, Tammy. Lori enrolled her son in a special needs school, but her 16-year-old daughter, Tylee, did not attend any school. As a result, many neighbors were unaware that Lori even had a second child, as Tylee was rarely seen outside. Around the same time, Lori made a disturbing comment about her daughter, referring to her as a dark entity in a phone conversation with a friend. On September 8, 2019, Lori, her children, and her brother Alex went on a trip to Yellowstone Park, where they met up with Chad. Several photos from the trip show Tylee, but after that day, she was never seen again. 2 weeks later, on September 24, 2019, Lori withdrew her son's documents from the special needs school, claiming she would homeschool him. Chad's 49-year-old wife, Tammy, died suddenly on October 19, less than a month after her husband's affair with Lori began. According to Chad, Tammy had been suffering from a cold and cough, and it was presumed that she died from respiratory failure in her sleep. There were no signs of violence on her body, and her death was ruled natural. However, Chad refused to allow an autopsy to determine the cause of death, a decision that raised no suspicions at the time. Following Tammy's passing, Chad received approximately $500,000 in insurance payouts. 2 weeks after Tammy's death, Chad and Lori traveled to the Hawaiian Islands, where they got married in a beachside ceremony. This news came as a shock to Chad's children, who were still grieving the loss of their mother and struggled to understand their father's actions. After returning to Arizona, they lived together and misled others by claiming that Lori's children were staying with relatives or that she didn't have any children at all. They also rented a storage unit and moved the children's belongings there, essentially erasing them from their home. On December 12, 2019, approximately 1 month later, Alex unexpectedly died at his home, appearing to have suffered a heart attack. At his family's request, no autopsy was performed, and his death was attributed to natural causes. As time went on, more and more people began inquiring about the whereabouts of Lori's children. She skillfully deceived her neighbors and acquaintances with lies, but it was more challenging to convince her relatives. Colby, Lori's eldest son, who had lost touch with his mother after moving away, made an effort to reconnect with his younger sister. However, Lori initially pretended to be her daughter, Tylee, when Colby contacted her. He soon became suspicious that something was amiss. Meanwhile, Charles Vallo's relatives were concerned about the welfare of his grandchild, JJ, and repeatedly requested to visit or contact him. Lori consistently denied or made up excuses to prevent them from seeing the boy. The situation escalated when JJ's grandmother reported his disappearance to the police. Colby also approached the authorities to help locate his younger sister. When police officers visited Lori's home to speak with the children, she lied about their whereabouts, claiming they were visiting relatives. After this information proved false, the police gave Lori an ultimatum. She had a week to appear at the police station with the children. Instead, she and her husband fled to Hawaii. On February 20, 2020, Lori was arrested on the island of Kauai and taken back to Arizona. A search of Lori in Chad's home was conducted, but no signs of the missing children, Tylee and JJ, were found. Initially, Chad had defended Lori, claiming she didn't have any children, but now he was also under suspicion. It wasn't until June 9th that police discovered human remains buried in their backyard. Forensic analysis confirmed that the bodies were those of Ty and JJ. Further investigation led to the exhumation of the bodies of Tammy Daybell and Alex Cox to determine the true causes of their deaths. Toxicology reports revealed the presence of chemicals that could induce heart failure, suggesting that their deaths were not natural. Lori and Chad's trial began in January 2021. They faced charges of conspiracy, first-degree criminal acts, grand theft, deceit, and insurance fraud. Additionally, the circumstances surrounding Charles Vallow's death were reclassified from self-defense to premeditated murder. In court, witnesses testified that Lori referred to her children as dark entities and claimed she wanted to save their souls. There were allegations that the deaths of Tylee and JJ may have been ritualistic in nature. Notably, Tylee's body was partially burned, and Chad had previously sent Lori an email categorizing people, including Tylee, as having dark spirits. Lori and her husband, Chad, were both facing the possibility of capital punishment due to the severity of the charges against them. However, in May 2021, Lori's defense team successfully argued that she was incompetent to stand trial, bringing the proceedings to a halt. Meanwhile, all 5 of Chad's adult children maintained that their father was innocent and had been framed by Lori and her co-conspirator. After receiving treatment at a psychiatric facility, Lori was deemed fit to stand trial again in 2022. In March 2023, the judge ruled that capital punishment would not be an option for Lori, a decision that the prosecution is still trying to appeal. Lori was ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole in July 2023. Chad's trial is ongoing, and he still faces the possibility of capital punishment. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Courtney Holden. The Holden family, a typical American household in Spokane. Judy and John Holden, who had 2 grown daughters living independently, also had an adopted son, Joshua, who still lived with them. Joshua, a quiet and introverted young man, had not yet started his own family and remained at home. The Holden's family approach to childcare was unconventional. The family saw fostering as a way to earn a steady income through government benefits. Judy's background and experience as a mother earned the authorities as trust. 4-year-old Courtney Holden, born on February 28, 1992, had been living in a shelter for 2 years when her life took a dramatic turn. In 1996, Courtney moved to Spokane to join the Holden family, comprised of Joshua and several other foster children. The little girl's heart was filled with hope for a loving and caring family. However, her dreams were short-lived. From a young age, Courtney was forced to bear the burden of excessive household chores. She was responsible for cleaning the entire house and washing dishes for every meal. If she made even the slightest mistake, she faced punishment. Life in the Holden home quickly became a nightmare, surpassing the hardships she experienced in the house. What was surprising was that the Holdens treated the other foster children with kindness, but they showed inexplicable hatred towards Courtney. Judy Holden was already an adult when Courtney joined the family, and Courtney was the last child they took from the orphanage. This might be the reason for their unusual behavior towards her. Courtney was subjected to strict rules, including being forbidden from going outside without permission. Visitors to the Holden home often witnessed Judy and Joshua mistreating Courtney, calling her Cinderella in a derogatory manner. Courtney found herself in a difficult situation, but she was a resilient girl who adapted to the harsh conditions over time. She learned to fear her foster mother and was terrified of her brother Joshua, who prohibited her from socializing with friends and peers. She was not allowed to have a mobile phone or other modern conveniences, and she only left the house when necessary and with permission. The only time she enjoyed some freedom were when the house was empty and she could step out into the backyard or chat with neighbors. As she grew into an adult, Courtney became accustomed to her life and learned to treat her foster parents with respect, despite their mistreatment. She did not become bitter, as she had no concept of a normal family life to compare hers to. Courtney's life improved significantly when her brother Joshua moved out of the house due to disagreements with their parents. This newfound freedom allowed her to come and go as she pleased, spend time with friends, and enjoy activities she had previously been restricted from. As a result, Courtney finally felt happy. As time passed, Courtney graduated from school and met a man named Michael, with whom she fell deeply in love. Michael treated her with kindness and care, a stark contrast to her previous experiences. Their relationship flourished, and they welcomed a son together in 2011. However, things took a surprising turn when Michael asked Courtney to move in with him and start a life together as a family. Despite his requests, Courtney chose to remain in her parents' house and ended her romantic relationship with Michael. By this time, the Holden house had become empty, as the foster children had grown up and moved out. Courtney's foster father, John Holden, had passed away, leaving her to live with her foster mother, Judy, and her child. Michael was allowed to visit his son, but only with Judy's permission. During Joshua's absence, Courtney's life with her son was relatively peaceful. However, after their father's death in 2014, Joshua returned and began to harass the family. He installed numerous surveillance cameras around the house, posting signs that read, "Smile, you're on camera." The cameras made Courtney anxious, as she knew that leaving the house would likely result in trouble from Joshua. Courtney's life took a turn for the worse around 2015. She confided in a neighbor that Joshua had taken away her freedom, forbidding her from having a phone, using social media, talking to outsiders, driving, or leaving the house without his permission. He also forced her to cut ties with Michael after the child's birth. Despite this, Courtney remained silent and compliant. Neighbors noticed bruises on Courtney's face and arms and asked her about them. She openly admitted that Joshua was physically abusing her. The neighbors were concerned and tried to help her, even contacting the police. However, the Holdens were able to dismiss the cases because Courtney never publicly acknowledged the abuse. As time went on, Courtney was no longer allowed to talk to her neighbors, who only saw her outside in the evenings. She obeyed Joshua's rules without question. Those who knew Joshua described him as a large and intimidating man with a cruel and unpredictable nature. He was also known to be paranoid and prone to insults. Joshua had a history of violent behavior and had even boasted about being able to kill someone and dispose of their body with ease. In 2005, he was charged with assault and harassment, but the case was dropped due to lack of evidence and the victim's refusal to cooperate with the police. There were also suspicions that he had committed assault and misconduct against a woman in 2003, but he was never identified as the perpetrator. In 2006, Joshua was arrested for domestic violence against his mother and for burglary, leading to him leaving home for several years. The last message Courtney sent to a friend on Facebook, nearly 2 years ago, was a desperate cry for help. "I have to go. I must leave. Josh is coming." After that, her account went silent. Family acquaintances described the dynamics within the Holden household as strange and controlling. They were particularly puzzled by the fact that Courtney's child referred to Joshua's mother, Judy, as Mom and Joshua as Dad, while Courtney was referred to only by her first name. In August 2018, a heated argument escalated, prompting Courtney to try to leave, but Joshua, larger and stronger, physically restrained her and carried her back inside. It's the last time she was seen outside the household. It wasn't until nearly 2 years later, in October 2019, that concerns about Courtney's disappearance began to grow. Michael and his girlfriend, who had not seen Courtney in almost 2 years, started to worry about her whereabouts. He was eager to see his child, filed a missing person report with the police on October 24th, sparking an investigation into Courtney's disappearance. The Holdens claimed that Courtney had abandoned her child and fled. However, they could not explain who was continuing to access her Social Security benefits and electronic food stamps. On the same day as the search, Joshua and Judy withdrew the remaining $600 from Courtney's bank account. The next day, a woman claiming to be Courtney called the National Center for Criminal Information, stating that she was safe and did not want to be searched for. However, the police discovered that she was actually one of Courtney's stepsisters. As the investigation continued, Joshua and Judy provided multiple conflicting accounts of Courtney's disappearance. They claimed that she had run away with a truck driver, and later, that she had left with a secret lover. The inconsistencies in their stories, combined with Courtney's unexplained absence, raised suspicions that the Holdens were hiding something. In October 2019, Joshua and Judy Holden suddenly left Spokane, further arousing the suspicions of detectives investigating the disappearance of Courtney. The Holdens' family flight from the area strengthened the detectives' conviction that they were involved in Courtney's disappearance. The investigation into Courtney's disappearance continued, and the Spokane Police Department attempted a welfare check in early October, which quickly escalated into a missing person case. The case was assigned to Major Crimes Detective Randy Lesser, who has spoken publicly about the investigation. The information gathered from police interviews and court records has shed light on the events surrounding Courtney's disappearance. When Lesser visited the house in early October, Judy told him that Courtney had been home just a few days prior. She claimed that Courtney had left on foot with her son. However, when Lesser asked for Judy's phone number, she became hostile and locked the door in his face. Later, Judy allowed police to enter the house to see Courtney's room, but she became very nervous. The house was extremely cluttered, with piles of items covering all available space on counters. Courtney's room was also cluttered, and the mattress was bare, giving the impression that no one had lived there recently. At one point, Judy panicked when she lost sight of one of the detectives behind a closed door and ordered the investigators to leave. When Lesser asked to search the rest of the house for Courtney's child, Judy refused. A neighbor reported seeing Joshua, Judy, and one of Courtney's sisters leaving in a van with a child. Detective Lesser found it suspicious that Courtney, who suffered from a chronic illness, had not seen a doctor since October 2017. Her last prescription was in July 2018, although she had been receiving medications monthly before disappearing. Surveillance footage showed Joshua and Judy shopping with a small child. Cameras also captured they withdrawing money from Courtney's bank account on the day she was declared missing. By October 24th, Joshua and Judy had left their home. When police arrived to execute a search warrant, they found that the DVR from the home surveillance system had been removed, and the family's 6 pets were gone. Joshua and Judy's mobile numbers were deactivated in mid-November, but 2 new numbers with Texas area codes were activated on the same day. A month after the Holdens left, a neighbor called the police to report activity at the house. It was one of Judy's daughters and her husband, who had flown in from Texas to check on the property. They claimed they hadn't seen Courtney in 2 years and that Judy had retired. In mid-December, Joshua and Judy traveled to Texas, where they were eventually found by the police at Judy's daughter's house. Courtney's son was also present at the scene. Joshua and Judy Holden were arrested and charged with identity theft, interfering with child custody, and using Courtney's bank accounts without her permission. Fortunately, the child was found safe and was reunited with his father. No other family members were charged with any crimes. The police searched Judy's home in Spokane with search dogs but did not find any signs of Courtney. They also searched a home in Texas and a vehicle in Oklahoma, but these searches did not yield any clues about Courtney's whereabouts. Joshua, 40, and Judy, 74, were held in a Texas jail where they refused to speak with police and fought extradition to Spokane. The authorities awaited a governor's warrant to bring them back, but since there was insufficient evidence to link them to Courtney's disappearance, they were likely released. This case remains one of the most puzzling missing person cases, with little progress made during the month-long investigation. The police have extensive notes on the case, but Judy and Joshua maintain their innocence in Courtney's disappearance. The police, however, suspect that Courtney is likely deceased, but they lack concrete evidence to prove it. It's tragic that Courtney was drawn into the Holden family, who failed to provide her with the love and support she desperately sought. Despite their mistreatment, Courtney wanted to believe they were her family and struggled to defend herself against their cruelty. The cruel reality is that there are many ways to secretly dispose of a body using chemicals that can evade detection by experts and police dogs, leaving Courtney's fate a heartbreaking mystery. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Rachel Anderson. Rachel Anderson was born on January 28, 1994, in Warren, Ohio, to parents William, Bill, Rachel and Patricia, Trish, Rachel. She grew up with a younger brother, John, with whom she shared a close family bond. Rachel graduated from Warren Harding High School in 2012, where she excelled academically as a member of the National Honor Society. She was also an active athlete, participating in soccer and volleyball. Despite the unconventional nature of her career aspirations, Rachel had always dreamed of becoming a funeral director since childhood. This passion led her to pursue a degree in mortuary science at Youngstown State University. Her hard work and dedication earned her recognition as one of the top students in her field and secured a scholarship. Following her undergraduate studies, Rachel enrolled in the Cincinnati College of Mortuary Science, graduating in 2016 with a Bachelor of Science in Mortuary Science. She became a member of the Ohio Funeral Directors Association and moved to Columbus, where she completed an internship at Shaw Davis Funeral Home. Rachel approached her work with great respect and saw it as her duty to support and care for families during difficult times. Rachel's internship was nearing its end, and she had high hopes of becoming a permanent employee at the Bureau. On January 26, Rachel Anderson celebrated her 24th birthday. The next day, her brother John visited her from Warren. Before he left to return home on January 28, Rachel gave him the key to her apartment. However, John accidentally took the key with him when he left. Later that day, Rachel realized she had misplaced her key and contacted John Kennedy, who had a spare, to arrange a pickup. After speaking with her mother around 6:30 p.m., Rachel retrieved her key from Kennedy. Since her apartment door could only be locked from the outside with a key, she had to leave it unlocked. Rachel stopped for dinner at her favorite restaurant and arrived home around 7:30 p.m. As she entered her apartment, she was confronted by a man who was waiting for her. He abducted her, taking her to the top floor of the building, where he restrained her using various objects. The man bound Rachel's feet and ankles with a hair dryer cord, tied her hands with a belt and blinds cords, and used a curling iron cord to restrain her wrists. He also gagged her to silence her. A man then forced Rachel to reveal her PIN numbers and subjected her to torture, abuse, and physical harm. Ultimately, he strangled her with a cord from an electric blanket, causing blunt force trauma and the stab wound to her head. After the attack, the man hid Rachel's body in a closet, leaving her partially naked with the electric blanket cord still tied around her neck. He then stole her car and used her bank cards to make purchases at several stores in Columbus. Forensic evidence revealed that bruising and red marks on Rachel's ankles and wrists suggested she was alive when the perpetrator restrained her. A DNA sample was discovered on the rope used to tie her up and on Rachel's body. The coroner's autopsy report concluded that Rachel's death was caused by a stab wound to the head and neck, contradicting the initial theory of strangulation. After interviewing Rachel's co-workers and her ex-boyfriend, who had an alibi, detectives explored alternative explanations for the attack. They returned to Rachel's apartment to search for clues, hoping to identify the perpetrator. During this search, they found Rachel's purse, which was missing her wallet, on the living room floor. 2 weeks later, Rachel's mother discovered the 9-inch steak knife used in the stabbing in a box in the apartment. Detectives initially thought the crime was a robbery, but the brutality and torture inflicted on Rachel suggested that the perpetrator was not just a thief, but a skilled and sadistic individual who took pleasure in exerting power over his victim. The investigators considered various motives but had no suspects and kept the investigation details secret to avoid compromising the case. Later, DNA samples were found on Rachel's body and at the crime scene, but unfortunately, they did not match anyone in the Special Services database. Fortunately, a surveillance video showed 2 people using Rachel's car to drive around the city after her death, and cash was withdrawn from her debit and credit cards. An investigation revealed a crucial lead when a phone number linked to the night of January 28, 2018, at Rachel's apartment was identified. Location data analysis led authorities to the suspect. Anthony Perrin, a 54-year-old convicted offender, was arrested. He had spent 33 years in prison for violent crimes, including rape, robbery, kidnapping, and attempted murder. Anthony Perrin had a turbulent past, beginning with his upbringing by grandparents, then living with his mother. Mental health diagnoses, including conduct disorder and antisocial personality disorder, indicated serious social problems. He entered a youth commission facility at age 14, then transitioned into foster care. At 15, Anthony faced his first charge in 1980 for abusing a young foster brother he babysat. A year later, he threatened his girlfriend's mother with a knife and attempted to drown her before fleeing. In 1982, Anthony Perrin was convicted of crimes in Franklin at 17 and served 24 years. After release in 2006, he moved to Georgia, was charged with forgery in 2007, and spent 9 more years in prison. Released in 2017, he returned to Ohio, required to check in with the sheriff's department every 90 days. On August 21, 2017, Anthony was caught with a woman in his car. 6 days later, he was stopped for driving without a license and found with a knife and shotgun, but wasn't arrested. Later, CCTV footage showed Rachel's car outside a store, with a man getting out of the passenger side. The driver wasn't visible, but police identified the man as Anthony Slits. He was questioned and revealed he was approached by a man who offered him money to cash in his ex-girlfriend's cards. Slits confirmed Anthony's identity and outlined their route on January 28, 2018, when they tried to cash out Rachel's stolen cards. Anthony Perrin remained at large until his capture on February 9, 2018, when he was taken into custody following a multi-day stakeout of his sister's home. Anthony was charged with multiple counts of serious crimes, including burglary, robbery, kidnapping, rape, and murder. Nearly 2 years later, his trial began on February 4, 2020, and 4 witnesses testified on the first day, including Rachel's co-worker Jonathan Kennedy, who was the person who found Rachel. The trial continued with testimony from Jonathan and the manager of the apartment complex where the crime occurred. Officer Frank Ghani, who was parked outside the apartment when the body was discovered, also testified and shared the surveillance footage with the jury. On the same day, Anthony expressed dissatisfaction with his attorneys to the judge and requested new representation. However, it became apparent that Anthony was intentionally delaying the proceedings. The prosecution presented expert witnesses on February 10, including a latent print expert, who explained how technology was used to track the use of Rachel Anderson's debit card and its connection to the crime scene. The defendant's sister also testified, revealing that her brother had given her the debit card, claiming it belonged to his girlfriend. However, after watching news reports, she discovered that the card actually belonged to Rachel. The final day of testimony was February 11th. The medical examiner testified that the defendant's DNA was found at the crime scene. Additionally, a forensic pathologist and a deputy coroner from the Franklin County office provided details about the extent of Rachel Anderson's injuries. During the final hearing on February 12, Assistant Prosecutor Amy Van Killen presented the state's closing argument, outlining the events of the crime and asserting that Anthony had murdered Rachel Anderson in cold blood. In contrast, defense attorney Larry Thomas acknowledged that Anthony had used Rachel's cards, but argued that he was not responsible for the crime. The defense attorney argued that the prosecution's case lacked concrete evidence, as the DNA and cell phone data did not definitively link Anthony Perrin to the crime. However, after deliberating for approximately 6 hours over 2 days, the jury of 4 men and 8 women found him guilty on all counts. The prosecution pursued the death penalty due to the severity of the crime, which involved the murder of Rachel Anderson during an aggravated burglary. Additionally, Anthony's prior conviction for a similar attempted murder of a woman weighed against him. Prosecutor Bryan stated that some individuals consistently disregard the law, and Anthony Perrin is a prime example. The sentencing phase of the trial began on February 18th. In an attempt to mitigate the sentence, the defense presented evidence of Anthony's troubled childhood, but the prosecution counter-argued that the aggravating circumstances of the case outweighed any mitigating factors. During the trial, it was established that Anthony Perrin was fully aware of his actions when he attacked Rachel. Despite this, several people testified on his behalf, including his mother, sister, a psychologist, and a former teacher. Anthony also addressed the jury, sharing a 13-minute unscripted statement about his troubled past, including an abusive childhood and difficulties after being released from prison. In his statement, Anthony described feeling helpless and claimed that the system had failed him. He blamed the justice system for his current situation but did not directly address the crime or apologize for it. After deliberating for 3.5 hours, the jury was unable to agree on the death penalty and instead recommended life in prison without parole. The sentencing took place on March 16, 2020. Rachel's mother was visibly emotional in court as the verdict was announced. Rachel's father also spoke, expressing his surprise at how Anthony, a repeat offender with a history of violence, was able to make demands and become hysterical during the investigation. The case of Rachel Anderson's murder drew to a close as Anthony Perrin's sentence was handed down. However, what stood out was not the severity of the sentence, but rather the disturbing behavior of one individual, Anthony Perrin himself. As an adult, he shifted the blame away from himself and onto the system, denying any personal responsibility for his heinous actions. Despite his efforts to deflect blame, Anthony received 2 consecutive life sentences without parole, one for aggravated murder and another for violent crimes. In addition, he was given 63 more years for other crimes including burglary, kidnapping, robbery, and various violent offenses. This marked a total sentence of multiple consecutive life terms plus 63 years. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Donald Alban Blom. Donald Blom was born on February 5, 1949, in Minnesota. He had a difficult childhood, experiencing physical abuse from his father from a young age until his teenage years. As a result, Blom developed behavioral problems and began drinking heavily at an early age. These issues continued into his teenage years, and Blom was eventually sent to a reform school in 10th grade, where he frequently skipped classes. The trauma of his violent relationship with his father likely contributed to his behavioral and alcohol problems, which became more pronounced during puberty. Fast forward to May 26, 1999. Caitlin Poirier was working the night shift alone at a convenience store. After midnight, a customer called the police to report that the clerk was missing. When officers arrived, they found the store empty. Reviewing the surveillance footage, they saw a large man grabbing Caitlin by the neck and leading her out of the store around 11:40 p.m. A man wearing jeans, a backwards baseball cap, and a New York Yankees jersey with the number 23 was seen acting suspiciously near a store. Catherine Hannick, an employee at the nearby Subway restaurant, reported seeing the man behaving strangely before Caitlin's store closed. As she drove home, she coincidentally encountered the same man, who was driving a black Ford F-150 pickup truck with an extended cab and white markings on the side. Hannick followed the truck from a distance and saw it circle the maintenance area several times before entering Moose Lake and stopping in a cafe parking lot. She also noted that Caitlin's car was still in the store's parking lot when she left work. Based on Hannick's description and partially recovered surveillance footage, police created a rough sketch of the suspected kidnapper. The suspect had long blonde hair and looked approximately 25 years old. Based on descriptions from 4 witnesses, a composite sketch was created and shared with the public through local TV and newspapers, seeking information about the person. As the search for evidence continued, hundreds of people from throughout the state gathered to help comb the wooded area around the station, hoping to find the missing Katie Poirier. Police used service dogs and helicopters to search for Katie, but their efforts yielded nothing. Her photo was widely circulated in newspapers and on billboards, making her case a high-profile missing persons investigation. Authorities checked the local sex offender facility, which was near the store where Katie disappeared, and confirmed that all inmates were present and accounted for. This information helped rule out the possibility of a kidnapping by a fugitive offender. Police then focused on searching for a vehicle with a specific license plate number, which led them to Donald Blom. However, the truck at his residence was white, not matching the description of the vehicle they were looking for. The official search for Katie ended on June 6, 1999, without any success. Despite the official search ending, many volunteers continue to look for Katie, hoping that someone might have seen something that could lead to her safe return. Investigators were also waiting for the perpetrator to make another mistake, which could help them crack the case. Maps marked searched areas, but Katie remained missing. 2 weeks later, a man called the hotline, reporting coworker Donald Hutchinson, who matched the composite sketch and had recently stopped driving his black pickup truck, was absent the day after the abduction and got a haircut. An investigation into Katie's disappearance revealed a surprising discovery about Donald Hutchinson. He was actually an alias for Donald Blom, a man who had a hidden black pickup truck in his garage and owned property just 12 miles from the store in Moose Lake where Katie worked. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered Blom's dark past, which included convictions for sex crimes involving the kidnapping of petite young girls, much like Katie. With this new information, detectives quickly obtained a search warrant for Blom's property. Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension agents tracked down Blom to a campground 140 miles outside of Richfield and brought him in for questioning. They also discovered that Blom had purchased the Moose Lake property 2 years prior, and neighbors confirmed he had been a frequent visitor until Katie's abduction. Blom's supervisor at the veterans' home where he worked stated that he had never seen Blom's real name, as he went by the alias Hutchinson, and was unaware of his criminal record. Colleagues described Blom as a loner who kept to himself. After his arrest, Blom initially cooperated with authorities but soon requested an attorney and refused to testify. Meanwhile, authorities conducted searches that yielded several items from Blom's home, but no official statement was made about what they found. Meanwhile, the search party resumed their efforts on the second day with increased enthusiasm. Katie's mother remained hopeful that her daughter was alive. On Donald Blom's property, fragments resembling bone were found in a fire pit's ashes. The fragments were sent to a lab and confirmed to be bone. A tooth was also found and sent to forensic dentist Dr. and Norlander for analysis. She used alternative methods to verify the tooth's origin, as DNA in the pulp would have been destroyed. A filling confirmed it was human and matched those used for Katie. Researchers identified it as a young woman's tooth, making it likely to belong to Katie. Katie Poirier's kidnapper, Blom, was charged with kidnapping and unlawful possession of a firearm, a federal offense due to his prior convictions. He was initially unwilling to consider a plea agreement, but later changed his mind, agreeing to testify on the condition that he be allowed to call home on September 8. During his confession, Blom recounted the events of May 26, 1999, stating that he had gone fishing and then returned to his home in Richfield, only to drive back to his Moose Lake residence. On his way, he stopped at a bar for a beer and saw Katie in a store while she was conducting business. Blom, who did not know Katie, grabbed her and forced her into his pickup truck. He then drove her to his home, where he strangled her to death from behind, a process that took approximately 20 minutes. Blom claimed that he did not commit any other type of assault on Katie. After killing her, he placed her body in a fire pit, gathered wood and paper, and attempted to burn her remains. However, Blom's account of the events was inconsistent with the video camera footage and the evidence found in the burn pit. According to Blom, Katie had asked him several times to let her go, but she did not struggle with him until he began choking her. Blom stated that he managed to kill Katie with his bare hands, but his recollection of the events was unclear and contradictory. Blom's account of burning Katie's remains was not believable. He claimed that he had burned her body to ashes using only wood and paper, but this was not possible. When questioned further, Blom admitted that he didn't know why he had made this claim, as it didn't make sense to him. After the interview, Blom contacted 2 local TV stations to report his confession and asked them to leave his family alone. As part of his plea deal, his wife was returned several confiscated items, including a parcel of land, a home, and the family car. However, Blom's confession caused significant distress for the Poirier family, who had been holding on to hope that Katie was still alive. Blom later recanted his confession, stating that it was false and made under duress. He claimed that the isolation of solitary confinement and the medication he was taking had caused him to hallucinate, leading him to tell the authorities what he thought they wanted to hear. A plea bargain was no longer an option, and both the prosecution and defense teams were getting ready for trial. It's not uncommon for people to falsely confess to a crime, and this can happen in a few ways. One type of false confession occurs when someone gives in to pressure from the police or interrogation and admits to a crime they didn't commit. Another type of false confession can occur when people are led to believe by the police that they have committed a crime, even if they didn't, and eventually they start to believe it themselves. Blom's trial began in June 2000 with a 5-week jury selection. The trial itself lasted another 5 weeks with numerous witnesses, including several crucial ones. Assistant Prosecutor Thomas Perler presented the case, and Blom's brother was an initial witness. He testified that he gave Blom a New York Yankees jersey, contradicting Blom's earlier claim that he never owned such a jersey, raising questions about potential perjury. More testimony came from 2 women who had been kidnapped by Blom in 1983. They bravely testified about the harm he had inflicted upon them, providing the jury with a first-hand account of Blom's capabilities. Notably, the women's appearances at the time of the kidnapping bore a resemblance to Katie's. Forensic experts specializing in dental evidence analyzed the partial tooth and confirmed that it matched Katie's age, gender, in dental records. Doctor and Norlander, who had initially been uncertain whether the object was even a tooth, testified that the tooth belonged to Katie. The defense called its first witness on August 7th. Amy Blom, Blom's wife, testified that her husband was at home the night Katie disappeared. From the stand, Amy explained that she inferred her husband's whereabouts after seeing a news broadcast about Katie's disappearance the next day. The location of the disappearance was near their country house on Moose Lake, 110 miles from their home. Given her husband's prior convictions, Amy assumed he would be a suspect, which is why she later recalled his exact location the night before. Blom arrived home at 9:30 p.m. to find his wife already in bed. The next morning, his spouse was still at home, having gotten up to start the day, and she had already made coffee. Blom's spouse also took the stand to testify about her experience with the police officers who had questioned her. She described how they had bullied her, implying that if she didn't answer their questions the way they wanted her to, they would take her children away. She further stated that the officers called her a liar. Additionally, when asked about a baseball jersey, she denied having seen her husband wear one or receiving one from her son-in-law among the clothes he had given them. As she gave her testimony, Blom became visibly emotional, crying and wiping away tears. On August 10th, Blom testified in his own defense. Under oath, he denied kidnapping Katie Poirier. During his 3-hour testimony, he alternated between speaking and crying, claiming his life was in shambles and that he was ill at the time of the crime. Blom admitted to the investigation that he had committed the crime, but later recanted his confession. He tried to gain sympathy from the jury by portraying himself as the victim, claiming he was under distress due to media pressure and his wife's threat to leave him. Blom changed his alibi, now stating that he was not at Moose Lake on the night of the crime. Instead, he claimed he was asleep at home with his wife, as she had previously stated. He admitted to being at Moose Lake earlier that evening but claimed to have returned home by 10 p.m. before Katie's disappearance. Appearing in court ultimately had no benefit for Donald Blom. Many perceived him as someone trying to dodge responsibility for his actions once again. At the conclusion of the questioning, Blom expressed frustration and made a last-ditch request to the judge, but it was denied. The case was then presented to the jury. Following a lengthy 10-hour deliberation, which included a 3-hour review of the recorded confessions, the jury found Donald Blom guilty of the crime. He received a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole.